BBC News article details how singer Billie Eilish suffered porn trauma as a preteen. She started consuming porn at 11 and quickly gravitated to violent imagery. At some point, she was suffering from night terrors and sleep paralysis. Additionally, she assumed that the behaviors displayed were what she was supposed to engage in and led her to unsafe sexual actions herself. The news article suggests that porn literacy for children should be normalized. Porn literacy is a formal introduction to the themes of pornography and an effort to help children distinguish realistic and unhealthy sexual habits from the fantasies on film. Do you think that this could be an effective form of education? If so, how young should we introduce this to children? Would porn literacy just normalize porn, and is that a good thing? If not, what alternatives would you suggest? Okay, so there we go. We're talking about porn literacy, and please, sig natural.
Man, there's a lot that I could say on this topic. I want to first say that, like, Billie Eilish, her little story on how she explained how porn happened, it's actually pretty shockingly similar to my experience with pornography, like same age and everything. And like growing up, it's pretty clear that like this sort of thing is going to happen to the youth. It's porn, like people are afraid of pornography getting normalized, but pornography is normalized, right? Like we're living in a culture that's saturated with pornography in a way. We see it in our music videos, in our books, in our movies, you know, and we can look at like hardcore stuff online all the time, anytime we want to. I know I'm sounding very socially conservative right now. I just want to be clear. I'm a complete degenerate. But when we talk to like young kids, like experiencing these sorts of things, porn has a habit of showing sex in this weird hyper reality that a lot of children can't really digest as soon as it can. It's stuff that's made for adults, you know, made for adults, consumed by adults. But increasingly, it seems very clear that like kids that have a lot of free time, that, you know, would do things like play video games all the day, can also look at porn all day, quite simply. And yeah, that can definitely harm them. So I don't know if like porn literacy classes sound super extreme and sound super crazy, but like I don't really know how else we're going to get kids to like understand that this shit is not like not only not okay, but needs to be consumed responsibly, if at all.
Okay, and Sig, once again, we have something in common because her story mirrored my story.
What a coincidence. Everyone here started watching porn about the time they hit puberty. Very shocking.
I love Pad. He's great. All right, let's go to Top Dolphin.
Yeah, thanks, Prime, for the intro, by the way. Before this. So I mean, I guess everybody already knows who I am.
Oh,
but
did I skip you?
Yeah, you moved me and then kept going. But you can find me twitter.com/topdolphin. That's where I also stream, but like that's the important place. Anyways, on this topic specifically, I was gonna say I think that like there's a lot of I think there's a lot of like porn is like this really weird thing in which like basically we assume everyone watches it, but like I feel like no one's really supposed to watch it except for like teenage boys. Like after you're like a teenager, like you're not really supposed to admit that you watch porn. Women are just never supposed to admit that they watch porn. And like if you do, like you're a degenerate, right? And it's like, and like I mean Dooby probably a big fan of that. But I think that we should be able to like one, engage with it responsibly, and two, like not pretend like this doesn't exist. Is porn literacy the answer? I really don't know, but like what we're doing now obviously isn't the answer because a lot of people like have really unhealthy relationships with porn.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, I do apologize. It was not intentional. I assure you.
I know. Yeah.
All right. Next, we will go to Blay.
Thank you. So I guess I'm going to say that with my statement on this topic that I think general porn consumption is a bad thing for society. It's because I'm going to take more of a socially conservative opinion here. I think that especially with children consuming porn today, it's not a very healthy thing. Obviously, with the aforementioned story, people get like traumatized by it and it troubles them in the way they think. I've seen sources that show that children, when they're exposed to porn at a young age obviously have like there's strong correlations to things like being sexually reckless in terms of not using protection, not getting tested for STDs, compared to like sample groups of children who don't watch porn or teens who don't watch porn, right? Like we use similar age groups to conduct these kind of surveys, right? Unfortunately for like the positions I'm going to hold, and I think making conclusive like statements about this topic, because any studies that would actually expose children to any type of like adult material like that would never get passed by a board of ethics, right? I don't think anything like that would be allowed to be a research topic. It's harder to draw conclusions, so I think we're just going to have to essentially rationalize our way around this subject, which I'm excited to do tonight. And I guess that's all I got for my statement on this topic.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll go to Pan next.
Oh, okay. Wasn't expecting to be next, but sure.
Expect the unexpected when you're on my panels,
I know,
Pan.
that's okay. I was prepared for it. Okay. I don't think this is a particularly large problem. I do think that, obviously there's problematic things that can happen with porn. You can get addicted to it, but I think that's the case with pretty much everything. In my opinion, the solution to this problem that we have here is not even really relevant to porn. It's a more general solution. I think the problem here is that individuals are doing things that they're not comfortable with just because they want to be cool and fit in, not because they actually want to do these things. I think what we need to do is basically encourage, more of a sense of independence and, make it so that there aren't a bunch of teens out there doing things that they don't want to do, like in this story, just because they want to fit in or be cool. I think that's the main problem here. I don't think we have to teach kids how to watch porn. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think the dialogue is in porn is really worth analyzing on such a close level like that they talked about in the article. I think that the solution is simple. We don't have to teach porn to kids. We just have to teach them to stand up for themselves and to do things that they want to do, rather than just going along with the crowd mindlessly and doing things that they don't want to do.
Thank you. Jay.
I'm shifting my position slightly. I do think that porn literacy is something that should be taught, but I think based on what Pan just said, it's something that should be opted into for parents. I do also think that there's a systemic problem with consent, and that is something that porn, I do watch porn, so I am a degenerate, it's a problem. It's a big problem in porn, and I just want to make a distinction in my opinion that I don't think anyone else has made. The problem with porn is that there is not taught it's not sex, right? Like porn is an entertainment and sex is an act, and one is passive and the other is not. So I think that distinction being made for kids is something that is important. I'm not advocating, watching like kids sitting down and watching porn. I don't think that would be a part of a program either, but I do think a literacy program would be beneficial.
Jay, once again, proves she's awesome. Dooby, now prove that you're the opposite. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this push to normalize porn, because you could say that it is normalized, but the continuing normalization of porn, when we know that porn is linked to loneliness, exacerbation of mental health problems, sexual violence, increases in risky sexual behavior, erectile dysfunction, lowered satisfaction in relationships and sex, could even link to fucking I think I already said the ED thing, but this is something that I semi-dealt with. I can get into this later. When I was addicted to porn, when I was younger, I think that, and putting aside all the actual like medical and mental health issues this could give you, it absolutely objectifies women. It objectifies men too in a different way. But given that we live in a patriarchal society where women are already trained from birth to behave a certain way, to make themselves pretty and to put on to kick on makeup and to shave their armpits and to smell nice and do their hair in a certain way and to pump up their boobs and wear really, really uncomfortable fucking shoes, all for the pleasure of men, to further normalize an industry that continues to objectify women in all these horrible sexual ways, right? And then to push that onto children and to
to not only to give them access to it, but to encourage their access to it by teaching them how to fucking use these websites is disgusting. We shouldn't be normalizing porn any further. We should be working toward making it illegal or putting so many barriers towards production or access in place that it becomes one of those niche markets in the gutters of our society, like fucking fursona sex suits and age play props, right? This should be absolutely fought against in every way.
Persona. All right. Wow. Thank you for that. You're amazing. You actually are pretty great. All right. So open to the panel. I'll interject, to help move the conversation along, but I'm gonna leave it to you. Go ahead.
First thing I want to say is that I want to address what Dooby said. All of these studies that he's talking about, there's evidence going both ways. These studies are not causal. It's obviously someone who's going to be lonely and is going to be more prone to addiction to all sorts of things. You could also find the same correlation with that in video games and stuff like that. Like, I don't think you can link this entire decline of a society to, I guess, which you're not exactly trying to do, but I think describing porn as this all-encompassing evil that it causes all of those things that you talked about, I think isn't very accurate, I guess. I'll start with that.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to... No. Yeah, you go ahead.
Just really quickly. So yeah, I'd agree that it isn't the only factor in all these things, right? But it's absolutely a contributor. And you're right, the studies aren't causal. There's like two of them that are causal. Most of them are correlational because, it's really difficult to just grab a bunch of random ass people and show them a bunch of porn and then track them and yada yada, right? A lot of people are consuming porn semi-regularly anyway, right? So it's really difficult to do that sort of thing. But there have been studies, I think Dylan mentioned one earlier, where in young people specifically, there is a correlation between a causal correlation between them having access to porn and watching porn and increases in risky sexual behavior. And this is something that Billie Eilish actually talked about because she felt like what was happening in the porn was what she was supposed to do, right? And this is why you have a lot of young people out there thinking they're supposed to be choked and slapped and spit on, because I think there was another study of about 300 porn scenes and found that like 80-something%, like 88% of them were violent or had like sexual aggression. These people were being beaten and pushed around and choked and all this kind of shit, right? So young men think they're supposed to do this. Young women think they're supposed to do this. And I've personally run into many, many women who think that they like this sort of stuff, who think that they want to be forced down and roughhoused and all this kind of shit. They actually do that, and they find out that it hurts, and they don't actually fucking like it. But they try it because they think they're meant to. This is how sex is, because they've been granted this fucking this distorted vision of reality from sex. From porn, right? So I really don't understand why if young adults, right, are having these sorts of issues and fully grown adults are having these issues, why we would normalize giving this access to this kind of media to children, right? To, like, let's say high school kids, if you guys don't want to be too inflammatory, right? If some of you guys want to go younger than that, we can talk about that. But I'm going to be a little bit charitable and say high school kids, right? And side point, I think it's kind of weird, Top Dolphin, that you would say, oh, well, nobody's really supposed to watch porn. It's kind of weird if you're like in your 20s and admitting you're watching porn, because these are adults having sex on screen. I don't think most of us would be comfortable with children watching adults have sex on screen. That's a little creepy, right? So just a little sus. I don't know.
Wait, hold on. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. There's nothing, not even close to what I said. All right. What I said, it seems like except for teenage boys like bragging to their friends, for the most part, it seems like porn is something that we talk about. We don't talk about, but like everyone is kind of like does.
Just to talk about Dooby here. I'm sorry.
I also want to go on that. Yeah.
Just saying, Dooby, like, so when you say that you want to like just outright have pornography banned, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so like,
yeah, that would be my ideal situation.
In that case, what would you like? Like, I know that you probably hate me if I ask this, but like, what would you describe as like being pornographic? Like, I would say that something like, for example, like it could be argued that something like 50 Shades of Grey is pornographic, right? Just like the novels. Would you consider those to be pornography?
No.
Really?
I think that's a little bit problematic. I think that book also pushes certain things about certain
everything.
belief systems about sex and about kink that just aren't accurate. But what I'm talking about, but there's no person being harmed in that, right? Maybe the reader. But in porn,
definitely.
you have,
also
you have the
another-
sexual
The
exploitation.
reader.
Yeah, the sexual exploitation of another human being on screen that you're watching being forced down and spit on and slapped and having come on it in her fucking eyeball. Right, that's much more damaging, I think.
It's fantasy. It's fantasy. How is that different from watching a war movie?
I mean, I'm trying to find out where Dooby's like definitions
Okay.
are, why he thinks that. So it's like, so you think that like it's about like the person, like two people physically doing things to each other. That's what makes it bad. If something is just like, so you have no problem with like say hentai then, right? Like drawn.
No, I think
pornography?
hentai is awful for lots of other reasons.
Wait, so that should
hentai
be banned?
typically leans because Japan has such a fucked up culture surrounding the sexual exploitation of children, young people. Hentai tends to lean heavily toward like underage looking
Or
characters.
even ignore. Okay, well
right?
let's ignore.
So I have tons of problems with hentai.
Ignoring the loli shota shit. Just like let's talk about just like vanilla. Like let's talk about hentai that is similar to like Western pornography, right? But it's just like drawn. Okay, just like drawn pornography. Would you have an issue with that? Because I'm just saying, you said there was a problem with a real life person getting hurt.
I would still say that's problematic, but less problematic than the other thing. So I'd like to, if I'm going to start somewhere, I'm going to start on the worst thing and then work down from there.
Right. So I mean, like to me, I would compare something like 50 Shades of Grey to hentai or hentai of a similar genre.
Sure.
You know, hentai of a genre.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So again, still problematic possibly, but less problematic than the thing where people are literally on the screen being physically harmed for entertainment.
I mean,
so
what?
Yeah. I'd start with the worst thing and then work down from there.
Wait, wasn't 50 Shades of Grey like that though? Wasn't it like full-on promotion of BDSM in the movie too? Like,
I mean,
Yeah, that's why I said that
BDSM.
promotes certain things that I consider really problematic.
Yeah, air quotes, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my take here is that I think all of the promotion and normalization of that being integrated into culture is pretty bad for the general welfare of society. When it comes to looking at things like this on an individual level and the way that it impacts people who watch it, generally we see there's studies that show that people who watch again the more hardcore adult material, right? Trying to keep it language pretty good for streams or whatever. I'm not sure what TOS really is. So when it comes, there's studies that show that basically these people become desensitized to hearing about sexual abuse, which is I think that's an absolutely crazy thing that happens when you have too much overexposure to this. And yeah, I mean, these studies have only been corollary, but with something like this is the best evidence we have that points us in a direction like this. Because you're never going to be able to really find a causal link between these kind of things unless you start doing brain scans on people, which I mean would be interesting research done in the future, I guess. So I have no idea really what to say to that other than that the best evidence I think either side is going to extract from wherever you stand on the porn question is going to have to be coming from corollary studies too.
I mean, if you want to make public policy, you should probably have some causal evidence, right? Because a theory that says it's caused by some common factor and not caused at all by the watching porn. Like obviously, if that's the case, then porn doesn't have these harmful effects. Then obviously it shouldn't be banned or necessarily discouraged, right? Like all the arguments against porn are resting on these arguments that porn causes X, Y, and Z. So it's completely central to your argument that porn actually does cause X, Y, and Z. So I'm sorry if I don't just take your the correlatory evidence as sufficient to prove your point.
Right.
I do think
I guess
it must be done.
I guess what I'm going to say about this is with this kind of evidence, though, you have to remember that something like this is incredibly difficult to find causal links to. And I would like to see studies, again, further research on this that actually isolates the variable of porn more when we're talking about these kind of things. And I think it's important to sort of narrow down your study pool as much as possible to find people with similar characteristics and groups that have similar characteristics. And then they can also be compared to groups with widely ranging characteristics. So you need to find people because individuals obviously struggle with mental health issues of their own and have their own personalities and things like that are going to be much different. But finding comparing small sects of people to each other, I think would be a helpful way to analyze the effects this has on different demographics as well.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be easy, but I do feel like the burden of proof is on, on the anti-porn advocates to show that it does cause all this stuff. I don't think jumping the gun and trying to limit, people's access to porn is justifiable unless we are, reasonably certain that porn does have all these harmful effects. So I do get that it's difficult to make a study for all this stuff, but I don't see how that's relevant. I mean, just because it's hard doesn't mean, oh, well, you don't have the burden of proof. Oh, I guess if you can't think of a way to have a study on it, well, then I guess you win the debate. I think that's a little bit silly.
I mean, I think even though I don't agree with Dooby, I think a lot of times in society we make we make policy based on a lot of things that are not necessarily correlative evidence. I think the issue in this case isn't necessarily that all the majority of the evidence is correlative, but it's that there's a lot of mixed evidence and there's not a lot of evidence, right? There's very little study done on porn in the first place. And on top of that, a lot of the evidence is correlative and very what's the word? When like they go, it goes both ways.
I wanted to make sure, I just wanted to make sure, Jay, you had something to say previously. I want to make sure you guys a chance to say it. And then we'll go back to Sig.
No, sorry, I was reading something. I disagree with the notion that there aren't studies done on porn. That's what I'm reading right now. But
I mean, there are studies, but there's a lot fewer studies done on porn than like other like topics or similar topics, right? Like sex stuff in general, there's a lot of big like one of the biggest issue with this kind of stuff is there's not a lot of evidence for it. They don't do a lot of studies because it's hard to get funding for the research.
Well,
I don't know, but there's dozens of studies on the topic too.
And also, I mean,
dozens
Pornhub,
is not that much, just to let you know.
I'm talking and then I hear other people talking. No, finish. Go finish.
Oh, I just said dozens isn't a lot. Like when we talk about like other things, like when we talk about how many studies there are that show that like cigarettes are like bad for you, there are probably like hundreds of studies, right? When we talk about like, when we talk about stuff like porn, we're talking about like a couple dozen studies, right? Like this is a huge difference in like the amount of evidence we have for like these types of things, right?
I mean, so I would looked at different like meta-analysis conducted on the relationships that this has to like people, like the psychological effects on people. And I've seen meta-analysis taken of like upwards of 50 studies, but there's like also been some meta-analysis done of upwards 280 studies, the exact number being 276 studies. So there's quite a bit of research that has been done into porn in terms of the effects that it has on people. And I think that the evidence that suggests, especially among teenagers, because like I wanted to address this to Pan earlier, but when we're talking about like something like this being a study taken around children, right? Like the relationship that children have when we're talking about limiting access to porn. It's difficult to understand that these kids, like you cannot conduct studies with like teenagers because this will never pass through an ethics board. There's no way they're going to actually be able to conduct these studies ethically.
You can poll kids on how, like high schoolers on who's seen porn online. I mean, this is free thing that's online. Kids are
so this is
online.
the next thing I wanted to address. This is the next thing I wanted to address because this goes into my argument here. The thing with these studies is that the data that we're going to draw from them is almost always going to have to come from a voluntarily selected sampling pool, which makes it much more difficult to actually touch on all demographics, because there are certain demographics that are obviously going to be more like exposed or predisposed to pornography from different like backgrounds. Obviously, like I think it would be safe to reason that when you see parents who are like, when you see lower income households and kids who have parents that are constantly working, unable to, attend and monitor their movements, maybe kids without parents in the household, they're going to be much more likely to, interact with porn at some point, rather than someone who's much more well off in terms of like having parents monitor them as well as wealth. And like maybe they have a stay-at-home parent, right? Like these are the types of things that are going to be difficult to factor for. So I think the most effective data we have gathered is going to be the voluntarily sample selected groups.
Of kids? I'm sorry, what does class have to do? What does parent income have to do with what a kid is watching? I guess I'm not following.
So my point there is that parents who are more dominantly in the home, right, able to monitor their kids, generally impose stricter rules and stricter boundaries on their kids, but more often than not, they're there to monitor them, what they're doing. You know, when you think of like the typical good parent, or like, I guess, helicopter parent, if you think that's a bad thing, they check on their kids, they check what their kids are doing, as opposed to children who are just left unattended, right?
No, I get what you're
Did
saying,
this man
but
just say helicopter parents? If that's a bad thing? Okay. Sorry, Jay. My
no,
bad.
I disagree with that. I guess you're saying like kids who are more monitored are not going to be exposed to porn. Is that
They're less likely to have more interactions or more frequent interactions with porn. Yeah.
in the home? Only in the home, because I don't know. I guess
Well, a majority of
didn't have any-
interactions
my
with porn
my
come from
interaction
home, right?
with my first interaction with porn was unwanted. So I had my parents were monitoring my online content, like passwords on computers, sites restricted, all that stuff. When I went to school, that you can't monitor that for a child. You can't, as a parent, you can't always protect your child in that way. So I don't know. I guess from my personal experience, I just have to disagree with that analysis.
Right. Okay. So my take is that more often than not, when we look at like porn addicted individuals or individuals who are more likely to interact with porn frequently, obviously one of the places people interact with porn the most of their own volition is in their own home. Like, I don't necessarily see people going to school and interacting with porn frequently as they would at home, right?
Yeah, but
So
there's probably a lot of kids who like watch porn
On
at
their
a friend's house
phone.
or a cousin's house
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right?
What?
Like,
Even still, that's way less. God damn it, the flag fell over again. Either way, my take is that generally speaking, people choose to interact with porn privately more than anything else. Obviously, because people use this material for, you know, filling out their certain like sexual needs, right?
Yeah, but isn't that?
I feel like we can grant this to Dylan. It seems
Yeah.
pretty
I mean,
obvious
is
that
it
like
though?
the
Because
vast
like
yeah,
the whole
why not?
premise of the thing was
That's where
that
we-
like
that's
all
where
these
people
people
watch
like,
porn.
pressured into like watching porn by all of their peers, but then it only happens privately. Why not like every kid just lie
Wait.
about the porn?
It's not that they're being pressured
Wait,
directly by
like-
their peers, right? It's that there's a cultural atmosphere where they think that they should, right?
Yeah,
like
wait.
that.
So can
It's
I
not like,
get in
you
here
know,
really
peer
quickly?
pressure.
To
Yeah,
The
sure.
article
You-
is
you-
like Billie
it's your side of
Eilish,
the
right?
argument, though.
Specifically, right? And like people even said this was very similar. Felt like they needed to watch porn to fit in with social groups, right?
Right. So what I'm going to say to something like that, though, is people are like have their initial interactions with porn from groups or from being exposed to it with friends. But the problem we're seeing here when people interact with porn on a daily basis in an unhealthy way, right, is they're consistently doing this by themselves. So yeah, you might have like an initial interaction with porn in a group setting or with a friend or around people. But generally when you're using it of your own, like I'm just going to offer an anecdotal example here, right? Like I had a chain smoking problem for a while. Okay. So I just was like sawing them back every chance I got, right? Now, my first interaction with nicotine, like vaping, cigarettes, all of that, right, was in a group setting due to peer pressure. However, as more and more I consumed this and more it interacted with me, right, there became a point where I had a dependency on this and I just started doing it in the comfort of my own home as much as I could, right? Like I just sit there and go, you know, like back and forth all as many opportunities as I could get my hands on it, right? Like I think that's how things function in terms of when we're talking about things people get addicted to, right?
Yeah, but are we? So I guess the question is, are you like when we talk about like making prescriptions, are we specifically talking about it because people are getting addicted to porn and this is a bad thing, or is it because the normal like societal like interaction with porn is bad? Because I agree that like both of these statements are true. There are people who get addicted to porn, and I would also say that like necessarily the normal interaction we have with porn can be really bad, and then we should probably change that in some ways. But like depending on which one you're coming from, the prescription for these two things is going to look like very, very different.
So like
Right, because people get addicted to like all sorts of things. Like video game addiction is like a thing, right? But like
that's
you
also
don't hear people
bad,
saying
right?
like let's ban all video games,
We're
right?
specifically talking about like this when in relation to, I know Dooby brought up by banning all porn, but the specific topic is like young children being exposed to pornography, hardcore pornography at an early age, right? Like we're not even talking about high school, we're talking about as young as like, 11 as an example, but just like people that are just like right before puberty or right during when you start puberty, getting exposed to like hardcore pornography, you know, do you think that's harmful? Do you think that could probably instill some bad ideas about gender and even race and even sexuality in people? Yes, no, maybe so.
I mean, it's possible, but I mean, at the same point, or at the same time, I think, as most people here mentioned, that's when they started consuming porn. I don't know, you know, obviously we're a small sample size, but
Right.
you know, it doesn't seem inherent to, you know, consuming porn at a young age that you get all these, you know, deviant social views like, oh, women are less and stuff. I think maybe, like, but there'd have to be some evidence of it. I don't know why
there is
there would be.
evidence of it.
I don't know why this would be any different from playing video games and violence, right? I think Top Dolphin brought that up, and I think that's actually a really good comparison. We don't think that, you know, playing violent video games makes someone more likely to be violent in person. So why would we think that, you know, about pornography? I don't understand.
You know, I was thinking that I made that comparison for a long time, and I thought that, but like video games are very different from like looking at real life people commit real life actions, right? Like
Okay,
when I was 6 years old, and I like was my grandfather bought me Grand Theft Auto 3, which is probably irresponsible, probably shouldn't have done that. But when I was like shooting people and like killing them in Grand Theft Auto 3, it wasn't the same as when I was like a little bit older and I saw people killing each other on like in like gore threads on 4chan, right? Like this is not the same level of shit. Both these things affected me very differently. I mean, like, would you agree?
Sure, but let me rephrase the analogy then. Instead of video games, let's talk about like. Well, I just want to say, but
Sure.
we can just real quickly. I'd say, okay, well, we can just replace that with violent movies and TV shows, right? It doesn't have to be video games, like in the violent, you know, TV shows and stuff. I think we can just amend the analogy, but yeah, what is it?
Well, actually, there's information that shows people are desensitized.
So you're saying that I think you said that we don't have any studies that show that there's like some kind of connection between this.
I didn't say connection.
What did you say?
I mean, there might be a connection, right? Because obviously, if you know, have a troubled, I guess, childhood, you might be more likely to engage in these behaviors, right? But that doesn't mean that the behavior or that.
But all the studies they've done on this, right? And Dylan's right. You can't really have like the kind of like in-depth study you need to run. You run into like all kinds of ethical issues. But like Jay Cook said, or Jay, I'm just gonna call you Jay. Like Jay said, you could ask these kids, hey, what are you consuming? What's going on when you have sex if you're sexually active? And there are plenty of correlational studies that show that consumption of porn does lead to riskier sexual behavior. It leads to them acting out the stuff that they're seeing in porn. It leads to them to increases in sexual violence experienced by the women, and partaking in sexual violence on the men's side. Right? It leads to an increase in like believing like in rape myths. Right. Well, she was dressed a certain way, so obviously she wanted to have sex. You could even like it creates that link in young men, right? So we do know that it does have an effect on people, and now because this has been like normalized to the extent that it has, you have people in high school, and not even just in high school. I don't use people in high school who are waiting for the day they turn 18 so they can make an OnlyFans account, right? Because all the kids in class want to see them fucking naked, right? You have these fucking vultures, right, online waiting for the day that some celebrity turns 18 and pushing her to make an OnlyFans account, pressuring her into making this OnlyFans account so they can throw money into her to see her tits. Right. Actually, this is a kind of culture that's created by the normalization of this kind of content.
Actually, I want to push back on. I think it was your first, not statistic because I'm looking at statistic, but generalization. That's what I'm going to call it, for lack of a better word. And I'll post this article from the CDC in our group chat. But between 2011 and 2015, so online porn is the thing. There's a percentage of 15 to 19-year-olds that they polled that said that 42% of females and 44% of males were having sex, comparatively to in 1988 the numbers were higher. So I don't think that online porn is creating this rage surge in teenagers having more sex. I think the problem is like what Dylan and I feel like what you're saying too, Dooby, of violence that's portrayed in porn, and yeah, just the violence that's portrayed in
Yeah.
porn is very problematic. And I guess my take is that why, if it's such a problem, why don't we do something to mediate it or prevent that problem?
Wait, so really quick. So I don't. I think you maybe misunderstood what my the first problem
Oh,
that I have
sorry,
is.
sorry.
So I don't care about teens being sexually active. I
Okay,
think
okay.
they obviously need sex ed classes, all that kind of stuff. I was very sexually active as a teen. I've just in general, I've been a very sexually active person in my life. I'm a little bit of a man whore, to be honest with you, but that's not really linked. I think in my early life, we did try a lot of the shit that was selling porn. You know, my girlfriend when I was 12, 13, shit like that. But that's not the issue that I have. The issue that I have is the kind of the objectification of women, the things that it teaches women about how they need to interact when they're having sex. It teaches men about women. Those are the issues that I have. And there is a movement among some like feminists to reimagine porn, to kind of what they're trying to do with the police, right? Like abolish the police and then remake it. They want to do the same shit with porn. They want to abolish the porn industry as it is and then remake it into something that could be positive. So I think it can be a positive thing for some people. I think in its current state, it's extremely negative across the board. And I have trouble imagining in a patriarchal society, right? Some kind of like porn industry that doesn't fall right back into the objectification of women and teaching these attitudes to young men about how they're supposed to treat women and sex.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I think the solution to this is to teach, women to be more assertive and stuff, and say, hey, if you're uncomfortable with something, say no, right? Teach women to be more assertive rather than trying to shape the culture, which may or may not be possible.
Women
Like,
and men.
What?
Wait,
yeah.
the
Women
culture-
and men, but
the
like-
culture.
Dooby's
What
argument
you
is
said was really,
focused
hold on, I
on.
gotta push back. What you said was really weird here. You said teach women to do X instead of trying to shift the culture. Teaching women to do X is shifting
Yeah.
the culture, right? Like
Yeah, the culture is why they don't do
saying
that.
the same
Okay,
thing. They're
that's-
both the same level of difficulty.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I would say that these shifts in culture are different, right? Teaching people to be more assertive is easier than suppressing the human urge to see, to see sex and stuff. Maybe that's a better way to phrase my point. I see your point though,
Okay,
but
well,
I still think my point stands, right? If you
I
rephrase
also
it,
wanna-
it's
I also
an
wanna
easier,
push back
easier
on
way
what you
to.
said. I also want
Okay,
to push
go
back
for it.
on a point you said earlier here in regards to like
Uh-huh.
violent movies, like comparing it to violent films, right? So the violence that you see in movies, like serial killers and people getting stabbed up in slashers, which aren't even that common anymore, shootouts and all these things, these aren't really common things that happen. I know we're in America and we can meme about it being common. It's not actually really that common compared to the average person's life living here in this country, right? So like sex is very common to a lot of people living their lives. Even the people that don't have sex very often are exposed to sex very often, a lot of the times against their will and everything. And pornography has become like the way to get engaged into sex, okay, in a passive way. Like pornography is the way to do that. And porn alone is filled with a lot of problematic shit, not even just against women, but against all kinds of groups. Okay, now we're not even getting into how horrible it is against like transgender people, for example. All right, shit like that can be incredibly problematic when you're engaging with those sorts of things, and it can be a lot of people's first experiences with like certain groups of people, women notwithstanding.
Yeah, with the type
I
of
don't see the
content that's
distinction
pushed
there.
in
Why does it
porn.
matter that
Wait.
sex is a common thing and violence isn't as common?
Because
I don't
people are exposed to sex and they're okay. When I say that, it's because people are more likely to just be like, okay, this is what sex is, and it's more entrenched into what we need to do. Like, okay, a kid is a lot less likely to get into like a shootout and do like violent things and want to like kill in comparison. Like very early on, we're kind of taught that like, hey, being hurt is bad and you shouldn't want to be hurt. But like men and boys especially are taught that, hey, having sex is good and sex makes you cool, all right? And thus they're going to want to seek it out, and they're going to want to seek it out in the way that they're exposed to what it's supposed to look like, which to them is what porn depicts it as.
So what
I
you
mean,
say
I
about
kind of
violence?
agree with
Oh,
you,
hold on, I
Signatural,
need to
but doesn't
respond.
that
What he
kind of
says
point
about-
more
I need to-
towards like the conversations we're having around things? Like, might it like something? I don't want to misquote a statistic, but something like 50% of households in America have like guns or something, right? Guns are literally everywhere. So many people like have probably come into contact with guns, yet people aren't getting into shootouts. Why?
Also,
Because
well,
when you're young, your parents say, "Yo, yeah, you see that dude shooting in the movie? Don't do that." Right? But because porn's this thing that happens behind closed doors, and like as a kid, as a parent, you gotta pretend your kid's not kind of watching it. You don't talk to them about it. And as a kid, like you don't talk about watching it with your parents. Like parents never have that conversation where they say, "Hey, you see that shit you do in porn? Like that's not actually what sex is." So like when they actually go and they engage in sex, they engage in this like they may or may not engage in this like violent version, this pornified version of sex rather than what sex actually is, right?
Okay, so I actually want to respond to what you said too. So it's true that murder and stuff may not be common, but violence absolutely is common. Everyone gets in scraps from time to time, and it also is the case that it is to an extent, idealized, right? Everyone wants to be the tough guy. That to say that, oh, well, there's no societal urge for people to get in fights, but there is to have sex. Well, I disagree. I think there is definitely societal pressure for people to be willing to, commit at least some form of violence. Which,
Well, Pan, I think I have
I don't
to.
think
I have
you
to
can
push-
say
I need
since
to get in
murder
here.
is
I need to get in here.
murder
I need to get
doesn't
in here.
This is heavily
Wait,
dependent on your location and like the people that you're hanging out with and like where you're at, especially in the country. Like I feel like a kid from like Utah is not necessarily going to be acting the exact same as a kid from like Alabama. Like I don't know. That's just me.
Wait, I need to get in here really quickly because I think it's important to stress that something like sex culture is way more normalized and looked as a positive thing, and like having sex is this cool guy thing. People in the culture itself and the laws we have around violence are completely like easily interpreted and understood as fighting bad, violence bad. The culture has shifted in a direction that negative like consequences surrounding violence are way more prevalent than negative consequences of having unrealistic sex, which is still like a bad thing.
Hold on, that's like the dumbest thing you could have fucking said.
Yeah.
Okay, literally
No, wait,
every
no.
movie. Hold on, literally every action movie that exists on the planet. Like one of the biggest genres is like Marvel movies. All of these are literally violent people beating like violent good guys beating up violent bad guys. Violence is literally everywhere.
Yeah, and do you think that with our laws and our institutions that violence is seen as a good thing we should partake in? Or do you think that even in the context of those movies, it's understood that, again, the quote-unquote good guys only engage in violence when it's to, like, put down a threat?
Hold on,
Yeah,
one, that's not true. But two,
Wait, do you think... No. Do you think violence is socialized to be a good thing?
A little
Yeah.
bit. Well, no, I don't think it is, but I think it's because we
So
have the
there you go,
conversation.
there's your
Wait,
answer.
hold on. I think it's because we have the conversations that entertainment is different than real life when it comes to violence and not with porn. You like bring up this thing like, do you think the laws around violence are positive? Well, no, because the laws around anything are never going to like what would be the positive violence laws that exist? What would
There
be
are.
these positive
Self-defense
porn laws that
laws.
exist, right?
Self-defense
Yeah.
laws, positive
Self-defense,
violence.
Wait,
yeah.
So the law that exists that porn is legal is a law that makes like a moral, again, juxtaposes morality onto the legality of porn, basically saying that it's either net neutral or net positive, right? So the thing with violence, on the other hand, we know violence is bad, right?
Hold on.
The
There are
laws
plenty
also
of
help
things that are
socialize
legal.
people. Wait, no, I'm
There
not
are-
done. I'm not
there
done.
are
I'm
plenty
not
of-
done.
I don't care.
I am
There are
not-
plenty of
I'm
things
talking over you.
that
I'm going
are-
to talk over
there
you
are
now.
plenty
I'm
of
going to
things that
start
are
talking
legal
over you.
that are bad, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, so all of the laws surrounding violence, like, you can't kill people, you can't go up to some stranger and beat them up. All of these laws indicate that this type of violence is uncalled for and a negative thing. Violence still happens, of course, but it's used as a great deterrent, again, socially, and it's accepted socially that violence is bad. And this is why we put down these kind of acts. And a lot of this has to do with the legality of it. The legality serves as the greatest deterrent against going out and killing people.
Do you think the
Yeah.
difference is that people can consensually have sex, and it can be mutually beneficial, but generally when you commit violence, someone's going to get, it's not going to be mutually beneficial. Someone's going to get hurt.
Yes,
Because in my
I
opinion,
agree
that's
with
the
you.
big difference between violence and sex, right?
There are
Right.
mutually beneficial ways to engage in violence all the time.
And
rough
those are
housing,
generally
right?
legal.
Rough housing,
Those are generally
right?
legal.
Yes, because when you make the stupid argument that there's all of these illegal things that exist and that's why something is bad, is really stupid. Every law, almost every law against everything is going to say that the bad parts of that thing are bad. That doesn't mean that that thing in itself are bad, right? Every law, almost every law that gets enacted on you when you're like driving a car, right? If you go to court for driving a car, it's because you did something bad. That doesn't mean that driving a car is necessarily bad, right?
Wait.
like-
Okay, so that's like the dumbest thing that I've heard all night. Laws obviously serve as
Can we
some
get off
sort
this
of
part?
interpretation of morality in terms of what's going to serve as a net neutral and what's going to serve as a net negative. When a law is enacted, of course, this law is enacted to serve as something that mediates like a decrease in the net negative. That's why it's a deterred thing. That's why it's discouraged, right? So when we have like laws that surround violence, my point was that we have these laws that surround violence, and because society generally agrees that violence is bad, and it's important to help further stress this notion through legality that, again, violence is bad. When we talk about depictions like violent depictions of pornography and things like that, it might be consensual in the video. It might be consensual in the video or whatever, or the movie. But the thing is that the socialization of these other traits, which society has deemed bad, is a bad thing.
No, but society allows things that are sometimes negatives. Like, for example, the free speech includes my right to say mean things to other people. It's a net negative to say mean things to other people. Just because it's not illegal doesn't mean that society somehow views it as moral to, go around calling people the C word, to stay topical. But I disagree with this completely. The law isn't, completely tied with morality.
Wait. But law is a reflection of morality in the sense that we have
Sometimes.
First Amendment. We have First Amendment free speech rights, though, because it's seen as even more of a net negative to send people to prison for using speech.
To take away from to go move a little bit away from this like law thing, please, just to go back to this. Like, if I think we were originally talking about like media and like things about violence. Top Dolphin, I'm just gonna talk to you, Top Dolphin. Would you agree that media portrayals of violence is in today's day and age is a hell of a lot more nuanced than like media portrayals of sex?
In media, it's a lot more nuanced.
Yeah, because you compared them. Because you compared like pornography to like Marvel movies and like violence and stuff, and I just want to say like the violence in Marvel movies is a hell of a lot more subjective. I've seen every Marvel.
And then, well, I guess like if you're talking about like if you're comparing like regular movies to like pornography, then yes. But like if you look at the media portrayals of like sex, I would say like violence probably still more violence is probably still more nuanced, but the nuance is like massively different there, right? Like compared to like your mainstream like sex scenes in like romance films, right? Like, there's a massive difference of these things.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, like, I don't know. Initially, like when we're comparing it to like mainstream movies, sure, but like when we're talking about pornography is just a different animal than like mainstream sex things. Like, I don't think like Dooby, for example, would have a massive problem with like the sex scenes as depicted in like Marvel movies. All two of the sex scenes.
Hold on. There's
I just said
there are
mainstream
issues with
films
Marvel
together.
movies too. Okay, about what they promote about women's bodies and men's bodies. So there are issues in those things too. But and it's true that when we're talking about sex, because so much of so much of porn today is aggressive and violent, borderline masochistic, sadistic. That's kind of a different animal, right? But I think that even like if that wasn't the case, and you had a sex industry where people were having gentle sex in bed, right, with very like feminist angles, right, like that are taken into account the woman's point of view, what the woman wants to see, it would still be a problem because we still live in a patriarchal society where these people are being exploited for their labor by a capitalist system that is run amok. And at the end of the day, this is sexual exploitation.
I feel.
Right? I think that it's akin to rape on film in a
Oh
lot of
my
these things, because a lot
God.
of these
I feel
people
like-
are doing this
Oh.
work because they're desperate for money, because they need to pay the bills. And I think
That's
that
why
if
people
you
work.
if you have the ability to jerk off to someone having sex from that person is just putting themselves through this fucking torture to pay the rent, defaming themselves online forever because this shit never goes away, and they're gonna have children. Their children are gonna be able to find mommy on the internet getting fucked in the ass, right? If you're able to get off to something like that, you have some mental health problems. We probably need to talk
think
about
that-
Dooby.
Okay.
I feel like you're demonizing every single person, probably in this chat, definitely in this panel, who watches porn. And
Yeah.
I can't.
If
I,
you-
I,
if
I,
you-
no,
yeah,
no,
absolutely, I am.
But why? But why? Not everyone who
I just
watches
explained why.
porn is going to go off and have this like dark, twisted fantasy that they see portrayed in porn, right?
Wait,
like
hold on, but
there
they're
are
contributing to the
different.
problem. I don't think you get to separate yourself from the responsibility there.
No, you can watch it responsibly.
So I'll give you another example of how this is like another way this happens. So we know that the cartels are a massive problem in South America. They massacre people, they torture people to death, they publicly like hang people's bodies up and shit like this. And we know that marijuana and other industries, illegal drug industries in the United States, fuels those cartels. So if you were to go buy drugs illegally from a drug dealer somewhere, right, and that drug dealer was getting those his supply from the cartels, you would be fueling the violence that they're committing. Right? So, and I don't think you get to separate yourself from that responsibility. Just like in porn, there are many people in this industry that are preyed upon by producers, by even by their we have many stories of like porn actresses, right, who are pressured into this by their boyfriends that become like their pimps, right, put them to more and more extreme cases. And fuck, what was that girl's name? Lana Rose or some shit was talking about how some dude made her throw up, fucked her mouth until she threw up in a bowl, and then made her drink it on camera.
That's
Fucking disgusting, right? But this shit happens to young women all the time. And if you're fueling an industry that where this takes place, I don't think you get to call yourself a good person. I think you should be demonized, and you should feel ashamed that you're doing that.
What makes this
much.
so like you compared it to the sort of exploitation and stuff. What makes this an inherently bad thing, whereas selling your other forms of labor? I imagine you say someone working at McDonald's just to, pay the bills isn't being exploited to the same extent. What makes sex work inherently different and categorically different from regular work? Because I agree that the situation you described is obviously horrible. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. However, there's nothing inherently different about it, and we do see cases of, I guess, legitimate sex work all the time. It's not something that is, completely rare stuff. Like
So I think it is. I think it is different. So yeah, it's also exploitation when someone's working at McDonald's. That's true. The reason I think that sex work, the exploitation of sex work and porn, is so much different, so much worse, is because it's taking place in a patriarchal society where there are consequences attached to this work beyond the work itself. There are social consequences. There's a stigma attached to these people. So, yeah, I think that makes it much worse. And being like honest for a second, you can't tell me that going and flipping burgers every day is the same as someone using your holes for 3 hours, right, and that being stuck on the internet for thousands of probably teenagers, children to watch, right? And then again, this is the internet; it never fucking goes away. Eventually, someday down the road, they're gonna have to worry about their family seeing this, the children seeing this, and all these things. A lot of these people fall into this industry because they have bills to pay right fucking now, and they're desperate to do it. Right, so it's a very exploitative industry. It's really disgusting that you guys would fuel it.
Yeah, not just that, but think about the mental and physical anguish that's like more extreme than flipping burgers that comes with working in the porn industry, and how poorly this industry pays a lot of its stars as well.
It's not going to be. It's going to depend on the person, right? There's absolutely going to be people who would prefer to be a sex worker over flipping burgers at McDonald's, and vice versa, right? You can't just say this as if it's universally true that it's more demeaning to work as a sex worker than to work at McDonald's.
I don't think it's more like you. I disagree with you that it's going to be universally true, but I think it's safe to say that the given expectations of an individual sex work contractor and the more variations and harm
this
that
is
could
so
come with this
simple.
work.
Wait, do you guys
No, it's
think
not
that
that
most?
simple.
Wait, hold on. Do you think that most sex workers are like, I have the option to go work at McDonald's, but instead I'm gonna do porn because they prefer like working at McDonald's, but like not able to. They don't have that option available to them. Like,
I don't
Yeah,
think
so
that's
labor
fair.
markets are pretty scarce when it comes to finding a job, especially if you have like
Right.
no job experience
That
or
is
money.
your argument.
okay.
Oh, no.
Any motherfucking, that's the dumbest thing you could have said. Any motherfucking
no,
person
it's
can go to
not.
McDonald's and get a job. Literally
That's
anybody.
absolutely ridiculous.
They literally
That's absolute-
hire
It's
And
not
they
ridiculous.
hire
everyone
high
who
school
walks in the
students-
door.
Wait, no. That's not. Wait, no. You're being
This is so
stupid right
true.
now, and I'm going to explain this in a second.
All
Okay.
right, here.
There's a limited amount of labor like of course labor markets they deal with demand for certain industries and certain jobs, right? So not just every person can go work at a goddamn McDonald's if they want to. Now with a market like sex at work, right? There's obviously a demand that needs to be met in terms of how people are going to do this, right? So the reason that people are enticed into this industry is not just because it's like a damn McDonald's where you can walk into it. A lot of these women are enticed into it because people who are, again, executives in the industry need to find people to employ with this system, right? So when you're going to employ people in this system to do the sex work, it's obviously going to sound less desirable than, making solid minimum wage, doing consistent labor at a McDonald's where you might be entitled to some kind of benefits. I don't know. I've never worked at McDonald's. I'm in long-term care. But, like the take is basically that obviously these women that are going to be enticed into do sex work are preyed upon by the people who hire them in terms of doing things like not just every sex worker gets to sex work is not like a liberally enlightening thing where people just run around and feel empowered to have sex work. There's a lot of
It doesn't have to be empowering, right?
I agree with you, but like the idea that like these people are all like choosing to work there, choosing the sex work. Do sex work because they can't work at McDonald's is actually delusional, okay?
No, that's
real
not,
answer,
everybody's thing.
right? Is that sex work generally pays better than McDonald's.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody would disagree with that.
Yeah, but that's a form of enticing sex workers to exploit them for doing more difficult labor. Like, of course, I understand it's going to cost like more to be like paid to be a porn star, but a lot of these women as well. Like, when you think of a job market like this, they're usually enticed into it and preyed upon or predated upon.
Well, if your version of enticement, wait, hold on. If your version of enticement and being preyed upon is just getting a higher wage, then I would love to be preyed upon and enticed to get a higher wage, right? That's a good, like, if that's what you mean by enticement, like, oh, because this work is less popular, they're paying them more. That's what you mean by like tricking them into it. I don't care.
Sex work, right? When I talk about sex work broadly, I'm not just talking about pornography. I'm also talking about prostitution.
Okay, well, we can talk about either both.
Yeah, so
it doesn't change my argument.
As someone who as someone who grew up in Detroit, right? Like, I'm just gonna say this right now. There's been plenty of instances where you'll see someone walking around with like a pimp, or again, and I think this argument can be made for people who are like porn industry execs. There's obviously some type of like they select who they're going to hire based on like a series of easily exploited characteristics. A lot of the time. Lots of people will go to people in desperate situations and give them the bare minimum. I'm not sure if you guys know what the iron law of wages is, right? But basically it states you're going to pay people, you're going to get, like, in order to survive in a market, you're going to have to pay the lowest wage you can to get that level of work done to be the most profitable for yourself. Very simple rule, right? But
yeah,
these guys are going to, right. So these people are going to come out here and they're going to, like, obviously hire people in the most desperate situations that they can find, especially considering they can pay them less to do so because these people are more strapped for cash. And this applies especially with prostitutes, but also in a lot of cases for low budget pornography or snuff films or things like that as well, which are illegal, thank God.
Yeah, in fact, many of these, there's been like investigations into this. There's been like stings on this. Many of these young girls who are like barely 18 years old, right, who end up in porn. Are some of them are forced. Some of them are doing so because they went out looking for a modeling job, right? They were told, hey, fly out here. We'll get you a modeling job. We'll get you in magazines, yada yada. And they get there and they're told they have to take off their clothes, like unironically. And then they're pressured. Well, hey, you're already here. I'll give you $2,000 right now if you do this porn scene. Right? There's many cases of this happening. Right?
Okay, well then make that wrong. Like, make it so that these practices of hiring, you have to make it like you can just make a law saying, hey, you have to be clear when you're asking for someone to become a porn actress. You can't. entice them
I mean,
to fly over.
it sounds pretty clear when they say,
being
"Hey,
a
I'll
model.
give you $2,000. Show me your boobs," right?
Yeah, but obviously,
Well, yeah,
these
but I
women
mean,
are
like,
more and
the
more
bad part
coerced
was
into
them
that situation.
To Top Dolphin, that part isn't the problem. The problem is them flying across the country because they think they have a job lined up. The problem isn't saying, "Hey, if you show me your boobs, I'll give you $2,000." I think that's.
I mean,
relatively
in general,
fine.
okay, if you want to know the real problem, in general, the actual problem in the porn industry, there's a lot of the girls in the porn industry, or some of them, not a lot, but there's a non-insignificant amount of girls in the porn industry who are trafficked, right? Like, that's the actual problem with porn actors. The problem, the idea that like
sex
people are
trafficking's
one of
already
many
illegal.
problems.
huh? Yeah, one
It's
of
one of
you
many
can say one of
problems.
many problems, right? But like when it comes
Yeah.
to like the problem isn't that there's all of these people who are being enticed by like the high wages who aren't thinking about the long-term consequences, right? I think that's much less of a problem than the problem of like actual people. It's not like these girls are like, oh well, you know what, like McDonald's, like I can't really get a job there, so that like I can go home and like I'm just gonna go like make a porn, right? Like it's most of the time it's because the porn industry is paying these girls a lot more than they would make at a job like McDonald's, or B, because like some of the girls are like kidnapped and like forced to do this against their will, right?
That's not the only dichotomy. What I was trying to talk about earlier is the obvious like predation that comes about on these women because of material circumstances they find themselves in, which lead them to, again, have an immediate requirement for money. Like a lot of sex workers, I'm sure you've all heard the term crack whore, right? In terms of like using a derogatory term to describe prostitutes. But a lot of the reason these women are forced into these kind of things, right? And I think there's a similar case that can be made for certain types of like lower end or amateur or budget porn, is that they need an immediate amount or a source of income to basically get themselves their, next like either rent or their next use of drugs, right? Whatever they're into. And these types of manipulations are what go on by like exploitive sex work hiring practices. That's the problem in the contention I was
You're
bringing up.
using the
Would you
most
say that
morally
this is
loaded
because-
language possible.
I'm sorry, I'm
make
talking.
this
I haven't
point.
talked. I want to talk to Dylan just for just one question. Thank you. Would you say that this is because the sex work industry as a whole, excluding porn for a second, is underground and not something that's regulated?
Yes, and I mean that goes for
Okay,
a lot of porn as well, right?
okay.
Again, I was
Okay,
never against
and then-
outlawing porn, so I'm going to say this right now:
thank
more
you for
regulation, good.
Thank you for answering yes. Okay, then why is making porn, now I'm trying to make a link here, I'm making a jump, I'm making a bridge. Why
Okay.
is exposing or not exposing, sorry, that's the wrong term. I'm gonna delete that. Why is talking about what kids are saying on the internet, right, from sex workers, and talking about what they're seeing a problem?
Wait, the thing I'm going to address here is we were talking about a completely different subject, but my problem comes with the industry and its flaws as a whole. And the fact of the matter is, when we're talking about like sex work itself and the exploitive hiring practices and nature of it, I was mostly touching on what Dooby said about the unethical consumption aspect of it.
Okay, so
Well,
that is
I
a
wanna-
different topic.
Yeah, well, I think it's a fair point, but to get back to a little bit more what Dylan was saying, I think you're using the most morally loaded terminology possible to describe something that's mutually beneficial. Someone who needs money because they want to pay rent and stuff is going to be more likely to need a job. Yes, obviously that's true. That's going to apply for literally any job in existence. However, they're still not forced to take like this job, right? Like as we talked about earlier, they could pay their rent by going to McDonald's. It's just providing them an extra option, another way of paying their rent. It's not ridiculous. Like
It is because
option is
these
open
are
to them and they're
18-year-olds
okay
we're
with it.
talking about. So
At
these are
okay.
Not just that, but these
Hold on, wait
exploitative
one
hiring
second. Wait 1 second. But these are 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
We know that when you're 18 years old, your brain hasn't fully finished developing. The part that hasn't finished developing is the prefrontal cortex, which is what's associated with long-term long-term consequences for your actions. Right? It's a rational part of the brain. So these people specifically are the ones that you'll find in these situations. Like, hey, here's $2,000. Yeah, you knew the modeling gig for $200. Here's $2,000 to take off your clothes and let me fuck you. right?
Okay, well then
And
why don't they
so
just like go sign up for war then? That's the get it, take the GI Bill. That's a better option, right?
it is actually. You're much less likely to have long-term health consequences if you go into the army or to the Marines. So yeah, I'd be
What?
totally for
Not just
that.
that, but army hiring
What's your
practices
source
are
for that?
exploitive too.
Exactly.
True.
Yeah, army
Highly
True,
hiring
predatory.
true, but it's a much better. It's a much better option if you're going to
Yeah,
go.
so
with that.
I'm saying that both are predatory and both are bad, and that's kind of been my point I've been trying to hammer on the whole time, which is related to Dooby's prior point of unethical consumption of pornography. And the thing that I don't think people understand is maybe because I grew up near a really rough city, and so I'm going to be a little biased here. But I've constantly seen people who have been predated upon because of their I think substance abuse is a huge problem, and people when they're looking to get people to do again underground or illegal work, which gets distributed on the internet as amateur films and things like that, right? I think it's important to note that these people are again unethically giving these people things like drugs, which is going to be very high on the time preference scale for these women, right? Which is just not an ethical hiring practice to get porn made.
Well, then you're already describing illegal behavior, and your point isn't relevant, right?
No, my point is absolutely relevant though, because the thing we're doing here is we're allowing this type of distribution of film for these. The thing is we're not heavily monitoring the regulation of pornography studios and the groups that export and output porn, right? That's my problem, is that we are allowed to make amateur films that don't go through harsh review.
Well, that would be almost impossible. Wait,
okay.
you don't. So,
hold
what
on.
if two people do want to make amateur porn, right? It's not unrealistic that people might want to film some. I mean, clearly not. You don't want to do this, but it's not unheard of for people to actually want to, make amateur porn videos and post them online. I don't see how you could actually have something just check all of these videos. I don't see how that would be possible.
That you don't make
Yeah,
amateur.
No, I
year and a
actually
half ago-
do.
I don't know if you guys know, but just a year and a half ago, just a year and a half ago, I think, or maybe even last year, even maybe this year, I don't know. All I know is that it fucked up my life. MindGeek, okay, the owners of most of the porn sites. By the way, most porn sites and tube sites, including the paid ones, are owned by one company. Okay, they've got a fuck ton of data. It's insane. But websites like Pornhub removed every non-verified amateur video. I don't know if you know that, but I don't know if you
that's a good thing.
Yeah, if you were on the site and you couldn't find shit recently, that's because they removed everything that wasn't verified. And it's kind of not even like YouTube. It's kind of you have to show your ID and shit and verify yourself completely for you to actually put on videos now, because there was a fuck ton of child pornography on all of those tube sites. Okay, that was just flying under the radar, and shit were just you couldn't verify it, so you couldn't verify the age whatsoever, so you had no idea. So because that was just happening for a very long time.
And
Wait,
then
I don't know. They have something. So there was kind of a solution, show your fucking ID so we can scan it and then validate it, and that's the only way to get rid of.
Wouldn't you just create almost like the MPAA, the Motion Pictures Association of America, like something like that, but for porn?
I mean, I don't know why you would
Yes.
rate pornography. All porn is X by default,
Exactly.
right?
No. It's you're not rating it. You're making sure that one, it's made by a rep. This is to Dylan's point. I actually kind of think that's a good idea. You make it so that because the MPAA has to watch every single film that is in a theater, that's broadcast, that's streamed. They watch everything. So if you have a regulatory agency or group of people that's watching all of this porn to make sure that it's up to par, then how is that something that's doable? Is that something we can agree on?
No,
I mean,
it
that
is.
would be, I guess, a really ideal circumstance. But at the end of the day, the problem is that porn doesn't make enough money to have an industry like that.
You don't
Yeah.
think so?
No, not at all.
Not the amateur scene, no, because even if you're going to make an independent.
No, I'm not talking
film-
about amateur. I'm talking about all porn.
Oh
Yeah,
okay.
hold on, but
porn-
even
okay, all porn includes amateur. No, am I? What?
wait, hold on,
and
but
porn that
even
gets distributed on major platforms should be reviewed.
And
Yeah.
doesn't it
So-
get ad money as well? I'm sorry.
That's okay. So
yeah,
so
but the ad money's,
understanding
way
that
less.
there are all these issues with the porn industry today. Kind of linking, going back to the topic of the discussion, why should we normalize and encourage children I think Sig said as young as like 11. Why would we encourage them to interact with this really fucked up industry?
I mean, the
Yes,
idea
I agree with
the
Dooby.
idea isn't to encourage them to do that. The idea is that they're gonna do it anyway, so we might as well.
That's
Like
silly.
it's the same idea as like why should we provide contraception to children, right? It's because they're gonna fuck anyways, right? So we might as well make sure they're engaging with it in the most like safe possible way. Right
It
now,
seems like
by
we're
the way,
focused on the wrong end of the issue.
right, like, we want to talk about laws like we did earlier a little bit. Every single minor who watches porn is doing so illegally, right? 100, like every single one.
Yeah, it seems like we're focused on the wrong end of the issue. So rather than saying, "Hey, well, these kids are they're gonna get to porn anyway, so just might as well teach them how to do it," why not just make it much harder to get access to porn, to get access to porn sites? Well, why not rather than classes for children about porn literacy, what about classes for parents where you teach them how to protect their children from porn? Well, you're on the wrong end of the issue.
Because one issue is like way easier to control. That's the biggest part of it, right?
I don't think so, right? So I think given the massive pushback we're gonna have in this country over porn literacy for children as young as 11, that's your traditional conservative types are not gonna like that on its face. You're gonna find lots of lefties aren't gonna like that either. Right?
Wait, is anyone here actually advocating for
Your
that?
alternative
I wanna check.
is-
Hold on.
somehow getting
there's
every
already
parent
wait
like a
1 second.
class?
So there's already massive fucking pushback on this.
Yeah, but
right?
the alternative is trying to
so
find
I
a
don't-
way,
so I don't-
right?
wait, 1
In
second.
which
So I don't
every like
understand
adult who
why
has a
you would
child
say-
takes a
Wow,
class
God.
on porn literacy. That's like
Yeah, I'd
impossible,
absolutely
right?
Why? Why is it
Like,
impossible?
This is like the same thing. Like we just like solve poverty by teaching poor people how to use money, right?
That's
the problem
stupid.
is it's
What?
really
Well,
hard
actually,
to
yeah,
get
financial
information to
education
adults.
would be really good for people in class. What are
right?
you talking about? You're attempting to treat a problem after you're attempting to like put a band-aid on an issue, but leaving the fucking like gaping wound there, right? So the issue seems to be that that children have easy access to porn. So hey, we make it much harder for them to get to porn. We provide classes for young parents to show them how to keep this away from their children, to teach them the issues with porn, right, and how it might affect their children's mental health if they get access to it too early, and we provide them tools to do this, right? We could also put pressure on regulators to regulate this fucked up industry much more heavily to make it much more difficult to get access to it, to the point where you need to provide an ID on the website to get access to porn. Why is that harder than pushing for children to be given porn literacy classes? You're gonna have pushback either way, right? But on one of them, you're gonna have people calling you a fucking pedophile. On the other side, you're gonna have the porn industry saying, hey, no, why would you want to make it more difficult? Oh, you're gonna have people worrying that there are gonna be leaks and people are gonna find out what kind of porn they're watching. Yeah, you're still gonna get pushback there, but you're not gonna be called a pedophile, right, by the right for doing it. So why not just do the easier thing?
Is that Dooby's
Is
argument,
anyone
by the
actually
way?
advocating for that?
Dooby's argument, by the way, is that everyone we shouldn't take the one route because he's gonna call you a pedophile if you
No,
take
that's
that
not what I
route,
said.
right?
No,
That's
Dooby's
basically
not
what
going
you're
to call
saying,
you
right?
no, that's so dumb. Dooby's
Hold
not
on, Dooby.
Dooby's not
Are
going to call
you
you a
not
pedophile.
in
No,
your
okay. Wait, no,
he's
I'm
he's
talking
totally
I'm
like
saying
dog
this.
whistling that he's calling these people pedophiles. It's
No,
so
the thing is,
so
we know
simple.
that's
100%.
that's so dumb. The problem is when we're engaging in an optics battle between sides of the political aisle. The problem is that conservatism is going to use this to leverage it against us. When the much more pragmatic solution, as opposed to what, like, we're talking about, literally introducing classes that talk about porn in front of children, when the much simpler solution is to engage with like reforms in the industry to make the industry less exploitative.
We're not
That's
talking
the
about
point.
that. I don't think anyone on this panel has
giving them
advocated
fuel
for that.
for the slippery slope arguments they've been making for decades, right? First it was the gays, and then, oh god, now people are gonna want to fuck animals. Oh no, god, now the transes. Oh god, now they're normalizing porn for children. Now, god, they're gonna be normalizing pedophilia next. You're
It's literally
providing
optical firing.
You're
No
providing
one-
the fuel for the slippery slope.
No one here is
I
advocating for that.
literally heard
Everything
you
you
say
guys are
Dooby,
saying
by the
would
way.
be true if anyone here was advocating for that. Okay, like
But I think that honestly, I'm from the opinion, and this is coming from someone who was one of these people. I'm of the opinion that like young children really shouldn't be seeing hardcore pornography, right? Like, is there anyone here that is like, obviously this sounds silly, but is there anyone here that thinks that like the current status quo of like basically children are just exposed to pornography at a young age and that's just how things are? Is that like an okay status quo? Is there anyone that's just okay with this?
God, no.
Right.
I mean, it depends on the solution to it. I'm not against, it inherently. If we could just snap our fingers and have it done. If the only way to get it done is to have like these massive draconian systems of like monitoring and stuff, I'd probably be against it. But if we could just snap our fingers and like make some magic happen that basically prohibited minors from seeing this shit, obviously that'd be preferable.
See, I don't know about you, but the massive draconian systems that I've tried to like propose here in terms of like verified IDs on websites and things like reforms in terms of like what we talked about earlier, like a pornography film administration and review board in terms of what gets uploaded to major porn streaming.
Well, we already discussed that
impossible
Pornhub
in the United States, right?
Well, we also wait, hold up.
But
Pornhub's already doing that. No. Pornhub is already doing that. I think Jay brought that up. That now they are making you show ID basically before you can get all this stuff.
They're not making
right?
show.
They're making models. They're making models show.
Yeah, for the content. I think that it would honestly be a better idea for people who engage with these sites to have to show identification.
Yeah, which is like borderline impossible.
What are you talking about? We can literally just legislate it that all the major pornography websites have to have a function like that. It's not that difficult.
All right,
show me one. Alcohol websites,
what?
They don't do that for alcohol webs. Like if you go on like a Bailey's or any type of alcohol brand, you have to verify that you're over the age of 21. I think it's the same thing for on Steam.
Wait, hold on.
And you literally just have to put in like it's the same thing you do on the porn site, right? You literally just put in
I'd
the
want
date
them
of
to
birth.
upload. I'd want them to upload their ID, and I'd want someone to verify that. Just like so Sig mentioned earlier that they did this on the porn people's end, right? Where they're verifying all these videos and need to upload your ID.
It's a lot easier to do it on
that
that
end.
end.
Do it on the consumer's end too.
It's really hard to do it on the consumer end.
Why?
Because you're not like to implement something on the employee end is very easy because you're paying these people. You say if you want to get paid, you do what we say, right? But on the consumer end, consumers often provide a lot of pushback against systems like this.
Yeah, so what? Again, like I said earlier, you're gonna get pushback from the industry. Like, hey, why are you making it much harder for our consumers to access our content? Well, yeah, fuck you. We want to make it safe for children. So
Dude, that's a lot of legal. That's like a lot of legal hurdle. I mean, like obviously, I know that your point is that you want to ban this shit, like period. But like, just like looking at it from like a perspective of just like if you have to scan your ID to like that means like the website or the server or someone would have to have a log of your ID. They would just have to have that scan on their server somewhere, which is already just like very dangerous. Okay, like that's something.
I still feel like that's much less dangerous than.
It might not even be constitutional. I mean, when we think of a right.
What? Hey, you're making the argument that I predicted earlier, right? Oh, people are gonna worry about leaks, and people are gonna find out what kind of porn I'm looking at. That's exactly the argument you're making. So So that's true, right? Like I said, there's gonna be pushback, far less pushback than.
I don't even care about that. It's just like people could just take your fucking information. That would just be really bad.
Also,
and you're right, Dooby. There will be far less pushback than the straw man we talked about earlier.
Bank level security, right? To protect your information. If they don't, then hey. You can sue them for not keeping tabs on your information.
Right? No.
Okay. I wanted to. I was gonna actually jump in now. Sorry. Let me turn on the light here. Okay. I just want to say one thing that I won't take up the entire time. But that's ridiculous on so many levels. One, so here's first of all, here's a better system for Dylan and Dooby, right, than the one you suggest, which is a dumb fuck idea. You could instead have a third party, right, with secure data centers to actually do this, right? So like you would submit your ID to them, right, and then if you are going to a porn site, basically like it interfaces with that porn site saying, okay, this person has been pre-checked and then they are 18, right? That would actually be a better system. It's terrible overall. I don't want it, but like that would be a better idea than rather have like a random site that like a woman who makes like videos of her husband, right? Assuming that they would have the IT security systems in place to protect your data, right? Each individual that's like completely untenable, right? That whole thing falls apart. Well, okay. But beyond that, this idea of like having customers having to check things approve themselves, right? They tried to do that, for instance, with credit cards. This is like a thing that they try to do, and like the Supreme Court shut that down. Like you can't require that they put in a credit card to watch porn. Right? This has already been adjudicated because like for all the reasons that you guys are giving now. And then the other thing is this MPAA thing. Like, what the fuck? There is no way that's gonna work. How much porn is produced? Like, how much? It's like, no way. And then beyond that,
no one would do it.
And then,
No, there's so the difference is in Hollywood we have such a
almost done.
Sorry.
And I'm done. But like, it's so much. And then there's a problem with like amateur, right, and pirated, right. So even if you put these protections in place, right, this dumb fuck ID system, right, if you put that in place, right, there's still pirated porn, right, like that'll still get out. So that won't solve the issue. And people pirate porn all the time. I think that's where most people, like these young people right now, get their porn, is like somehow pirated porn, right? So like you're not actually protecting it, and then you're just damaging the industry. I know Dooby's okay with that, and maybe Blay as well, because they don't like the industry, but still, that's the case. And then finally, damaging the industry. You're not protecting people. Fuck, there's something. I don't know. I guess just doing it for amateurs would be like watching every like you would have to have a mass industry to watch the industry, right? I just don't see how that's workable. All right,
wait, I need to get in here and address the things that Prime said really quickly. So when I'm talking about this, I'm actually talking about like having only verified studios being the main like exporters and producers of porn in terms of how we regulate it, in terms of like film bureaus and things like that. Also, with a mandatory ID system, again, I think there should only be like a handful of like legal mainstream porn distributors, or again, like a central source. All of them would have to be attached to, and all of them would have to get reviewed for their websites in order for people to use them. Like, you know, that ID system you said where it could interface with it. It would have to be one of two alternatives. So I think it's important to stress that, again, we're not like, this would see obviously like almost a butchering and a murdering of amateur porn, sure. But I still think that that's going to be a net benefit in terms of like preventing the distribution of like trafficked or exploitative or unethically produced porn.
Yeah, and just I think the idea that you couldn't have a system where these people are required to make accounts to present their ID, get verified to access this content is that seems outlandish. I don't know why you think so.
I just gave you a system to do exactly that.
Wait, you gave me a system.
Yeah. I said, just very quickly, what I said was, instead of having each individual site have to handle that information, right? Just like how they do it with credit cards, right? Like the site you are going to does not handle your credit card, right? And you don't want them to, right? Instead, they got a third party, right? That's accredited and has systems that have been like examined to be secure, right? You want that to actually handle that the verification process, not.
Oh, I think I misunderstood you.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Prime,
Yeah,
I don't think anyone was disagreeing with that idea. Yeah, I don't think anyone
fine.
was disagreeing with that idea fundamentally in terms of like how to produce identification. We didn't lay out like an actual system for it, just sort of the prospect that ID needs to be presented. It doesn't matter whether it's like, say you're obviously a reputable site like Pornhub, for example, right? This website might have their own private interfacing version of that.
That's fine. Like, we don't have to go into these. I just like, here is a system. But anyway, I think it's a bad idea. That's the more important thing, is that like, I don't want that at all. I was just presenting a better system for the use that you guys can use. That's all.
We need blockchain technology that verifies our age and gets us access to the booba.
No.
Yes. Make it unironic.
Jay,
I mean, so the reason this is like really it's possible with like, when it comes to credit cards is because like every time you make a credit card transaction, like you can take a piece of that, right? But with porn, like unless you're like forcing people to buy it, right? Like you get rid of free porn on the internet for say, like there's no necessarily monetary transaction that has to have there, and the porn industry just doesn't make enough money to support systems like this. Now, like maybe like a possibility could be like maybe the alcohol industry or another industry that's like 21 plus or something like that, or 18 plus, makes a verification system that could be then co-opted by the porn system. But in general, like the porn industry can't like sustain something this way because it just doesn't make enough money.
That's the industry.
It doesn't make
Oh
enough
my
money
God.
for the volume of like content that it makes.
Oh,
It-
no,
that's the
no,
industry
no, no,
problem.
no. Top, I knew. Okay, so I just Googled this. Globally, porn is a $97 billion industry. Globally.
Yeah, but that doesn't
Yeah.
And
mean
then
in
it's
the
10 to
marginal
12.
cases of
Hey,
amateur
So
production,
But-
right?
But if we're talking about reforming porn, the porn industry, why are we including amateur porn?
I mean,
one, that's a big
a
part of
type
it,
of
and
porn.
two, if you're causing someone to go through, like, let's say we're doing like the NHSA, whatever, I don't remember what it's called, but for like films, like for
Oh,
porn,
MPAA,
right?
yeah.
NPAA, like they would also have to literally watch every single amateur video, right? To
Yeah.
put a gate on a website, every single user who goes to that website and to every website, including amateur sites, would also have to be gated, right? This wouldn't only apply to like stuff made in studios. So like,
Okay, but what
that's the
about like,
problem.
what about people who make fucking films and put them on Vimeo? Like, it's like, I don't know. I think there's a way to do it. I don't know.
Well, the difference there is that like so to be clear, I'm not even sure if Netflix, I don't know. I know Netflix is still like partial to like labor unions, but I'm not even sure if Netflix like has to follow the same standards when they release stuff on their own platforms as like people who release stuff into like the like rated content that goes into like the mainstream, like in movie
They
theaters
do
and stuff like that, right?
So they do have you know, people who studio execs and people who like watch the content ahead of time. Like there's a team of people who watch the content ahead of time and make sure that it's viable for people to watch in terms of monetary value, not in terms of, and that sets a standard, right? Like Netflix isn't making porn, right? So they're not
I mean,
family
that's
friendly.
debatable, right? But
They're not family friendly, but they're also, you know, not X-rated. But I did have a thought. So
yeah, but
I
no, what I'm
think
saying
if-
is that like, so like the difference between like somebody on Vimeo, right, is like distribution platforms are different. We're talking about like a different, so like movies that go into like
Vimeo isn't
mainstream distribution platforms.
It's like YouTube.
Hmm?
So no,
I know, but I'm saying like stuff on Vimeo and stuff on YouTube, for example, or even possibly things that are like posted to Netflix, don't necessarily have to go through the same level of scrutiny as things that are seen in movie theaters and shown on TV.
And this is
right?
where I'm going to push back. Yes, they do, because they have to. They're going through the scrutiny of an audience. They're going through the scrutiny of the public, right? So videos, I'll use Vimeo again as an example. Videos that are posted on there usually tend to be of a higher production value. Narratively, they're indie, right? But they have, I mean, they still have like a better production value than your run of the mill like TikTok or YouTube video that Joe Schmo posts. So because of that, it is looked at as a site for filmmakers that is reputable and a place to post your film if you want to get into a higher echelon, let's say a Netflix, or if even like, you know, a Warner Brothers, like a high film studio. If you want to get in that higher echelon of the industry, right? So bringing it back to porn, if Pornhub decides to remove all of the amateur videos that they have and only make exclusive content that is done by Pornhub Studios, and they set a standard, then yeah, people are going to start, and people want to pay for that content, then yes, I think people will start making content in that way, content being porn.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that the difference is just like, it seems like with porn, right? If we like require certain things, like the porn industry, because it's like almost all online now, is like incredibly more flexible than like the film industry. And a lot of times when you put, and because there's not as much money to be made and stuff like that, compared to like the film industry, that like when you put like small barriers like this in place, a lot of times people just like find new websites, right? or they find new places to distribute where like these regulations don't exist. So like Pornhub is never going to put something that like put something in place that alienates their whole audience to go to like other website. I don't use any other porn sites, so someone can help me out with the name, but like I don't know. Like that's like the big problem with regulating porn in that way.
I think
And that unless you want to go like the nuclear route and just get rid of all of it. Like you could do that.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to like the literacy in and of itself, right? Like, have we covered like exactly how young this would be, like when we would introduce this?
Does anyone here actually want the literacy though? Because it was my impression that everyone thought that was kind of a silly idea,
I
and
was the
that
only one.
just a regular
I
sex
counted.
ed course is fine. Oh, did
No,
you,
I-
Kay or Jay? Sorry.
I mean,
Sex-
a regular
okay.
sex ed is the same thing. I mean, like, you don't have to have separate class.
Sex ed is not the same thing.
No, no,
sex
no,
ed
no,
is-
no, no, no.
There's a
I'm
difference
saying,
between-
no, I'm
This
saying
would be a part
no,
of sex ed.
Yeah, no,
incorporating. Yeah, that's what
Right,
I mean.
I get that, right? But I don't think. Fine, let me rephrase. I don't think anyone here besides Jay supports adding that to the sex ed curriculum.
Oh, if we're
I
adding,
think depending on how you do it, I think it'd be fine.
I can agree
like,
with that. Depending on its
me-
implementation, it could be
Yeah,
valid.
I think if we can literally teach kids how to fuck, we should literally be able to teach kids how to watch people fucking. Like
I don't know. To me, like in a perfect world, it should be the parents that have like that teach like things like porn literacy. Like it really should just be the fucking. There's a lot of things that the parents should just do, but like it's clear that like people like just don't have that responsibility. So maybe public schools should just do it. Like if you're gonna fold that into sex ed and just be like, hey, even if porn literacy is just telling kids, hey, the things you see in videos online, that's not what sex really is. Even just telling kids that would probably just do fucking wonders, okay? Just alone.
I mean, if that's all you mean by, porn education, then yeah, sure. But what the article recommended wasn't simply saying, hey, porn's bad. It was like going over porn scripts and talking about all of this stuff. So I imagine we could water down this, porn education class to the point, or this porn literacy class to the point where no one would have any objection because it's so, watered down. But I feel like, we should probably address like what they was talked about in the article, that position of sex literacy, which was some things that I think is kind of ridiculous, like reviewing, porn scripts and stuff.
I think that reviewing porn scripts is not like, I don't think that's a negative thing, honestly. Like,
Whoa.
porn scripts have, just to show kids that like porn scripts have like really shitty things in them. Obviously, like it's kind of hard because like that would be something where you could expose kids to like that dialogue for the first time, and it could obviously backfire and be like a terrible thing. But like there's got to be a point where you simply are able to say, hey, this is bad and don't do this. It's hard to describe exactly how you would do that without just outright telling them the material that's the bad thing, right?
I think it's important that we can implement like if we were to add some kind of like part of this to sex ed, because I think like when I hear like like porn reviewing class or whatever, like I forget this exact term, but my point was like I think something like that serves as like an optical nightmare, whereas I think it would be better if we simply started with like having teachers just like it would be part of the sex ed curriculum instead of its own thing, because I thought we were talking about this like it's its own separate program in relation to like sexual educations or things like that, where it's like a unit or a whole like block of teaching, as opposed to like I think it would be important to incorporate it like in a really minute way into the curriculum to say, guys, porn is unrealistic.
Any way that this is implemented is probably going to happen through sex ed, right? Like if we said we were going to put like contraceptive literacy into school systems, right? Sounds really big and scary, but at the end of the day, it's like we're going to talk about condoms in the health class, right? And, So like at the end of the day, like this is probably going to like the way this would probably look is there would be a porn section of like a health or a sex ed like class in school, and they would go and like depending on like where they landed with the curriculum, maybe they're going over porn scripts, maybe they're just talking about like healthy ways to engage with porn, and when you should see help if like porn usage isn't enough, stuff like that. There's like a lot of ways you can do this. The ways that like the article said were kind of like seemed like the most extreme version of it. But like you could obviously water this down, like not even that much, and make it like much more palatable. And like if it went into a unit in a health class, like there wouldn't be as much pushback. People wouldn't care.
Right. So yeah,
no more than they care that we're putting like condoms on bananas. Like
right. So my thing is I don't want this to get flipped. I don't want this to get flipped against us. Like people take like CRT and flip that against people. It's like some sort of fear mongerable dunk, right? Like that's the thing that threatens me the most in terms of how we're gonna like push policy. So when I'm talking about pushing policy, I think something optically for like I'm assuming most of us are at least left wing adjacent here. I think that's something that's more optically.
I don't think maybe most of us, but
yeah, I said most. I didn't say all. I know
no,
you like
know.
center or like I was on the infrared showdown with you, I think once or twice.
Yeah, I remember you completely destroyed the entire panel forever.
Yeah, exactly. I got banned for eating chicken wings and burping in the microphone, but
good work.
Yeah, proud of myself.
Getting rid of PrimeCayes competition.
Exactly, showing them who's boss. And so like basically like most of us are left wing adjacent here, so I think that's like important for the left wing to like get optical victories when it can, which is why I have like my reservations about something like this being passed on like an agenda. Like if we start small, I think that's better. Like yeah, if it's part of like sex ed curriculum to say, you know, porn is unrealistic and it supports unhealthy behaviors, even that I don't think would get like much pushback from like conservative crowds. But the whole going over porn scripts thing, that would be something that's optically not palatable for the left wing.
I mean, so one, the conservatives already push back against basically any sex education in schools, right? So the idea that they wouldn't push back against porn education, I don't agree with that. But yeah, like at the end of the day, like you can, like ideally this would probably, like if you want to talk about palatability, this isn't probably going to be like, this probably wouldn't be like some national thing talked about national stand. Like at the most national level, it'd probably go through like the Department of Education and done through funding, or like at a minute level, it would probably be done at like the state level, and done through like funding imposed on schools for curriculum and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's like most likely how you'd implement it.
Right. So I guess the thing that I'm trying to say here, though, is like when I was talking about the education from conservatism, right? Like the people who are already against the sex education, I wasn't really factoring them in because their positions already stand firm on what they feel about sex ed. But when I'm talking about like, obviously there's a demographic of people sex ed is, again, like they're receptive of it. So the thing I'm trying to do is not deter those people from being in favor of sex ed by like really gradual reforms to this like educational aspect of it.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't understand why we would even go that far. So obviously reviewing porn scripts in class is really fucked. But taking the step to like, oh well, hey, you know, the stuff you see in porn isn't real life. I don't know why you need to go to porn or even reference porn to say, hey, don't hurt people, don't pin people down against the road, don't punch people, don't slap people, don't spit on people.
Well, Dooby,
you don't need. Hold on. What you should be saying is saying to these kids is don't watch porn. Porn is something that adults do in their free time. You don't do it. You don't have access to it. Don't look it up. It's a bad thing. And if these kids go and do it in their own time, then hey, that's on their parents, right? But it's not something that should be even like it's not something that should be normalized in the classroom, especially not in its current state.
Why couldn't you make the same argument for abstinence-only education? Why couldn't you just say like,
don't spit on people, don't slap people? Like obviously, like, but when that's in pornography, right? That stuff is portrayed as positive, right? The subject is being portrayed as willing to do these sorts of things. So obviously, that's going to lead to a lot of confusion when you tell someone not to do something, whether that's portrayed as pleasurable. And some people, even without the influence of pornography, do enjoy that sort of thing, right? Like in a sexual way.
That's questionable. But sure.
Really? You don't think anyone enjoyed it before porn was a thing?
I think it's at this point, especially in the West. I mean, in most of the world, really, it's a chicken and the egg scenario. The West is patriarchal. Most of the world is patriarchal, And in these societies, men like to dominate women and have control over women and to assert that authority over women by treating them as less than humans. So it's hard to know if some women are into that because they've been trained to think that way, and because you got to understand, these women are subjected to training by the patriarchal structure that we live in from the moment they're born. Men are subjected to similar to training too, but it's in a different way, right? So I think it's very difficult to know where that started. It could be that, because there's a history in the human race of conquest and rape, that some of these men found that they liked doing the raping. So and those attitudes carried over into when they actually settled down and had kids. Hey, well, I went around conquering people and raping them and shit, and now I just can't get off unless I rape somebody. So, wife, you gotta fight me and say no, and I'm gonna punch you in the face and shit like that. It could be that some shit like that happened, right? And this is why these attitudes exist across the world. But I don't fucking know. I think it's really hard to say. I don't think that women inherently want to be controlled and have like
certain people, and not even just women, but just certain people like to do that. Just
Yeah, but you're gonna find that a lot of those things are tied to like some form of mental illness, trauma, or whatever the fuck. Right? It's really difficult to know where that stuff starts. But kind of getting back to the porn thing, I don't see why there's a good reason. You guys haven't given a good reason for us to have that conversation in the classroom at all. I think if we're gonna have that conversation in some kind of like a state setting, right, like state institution setting, it should be us reaching out to parents to let them know how they can protect their children from this really fucked up industry. And we should be pressuring regulators to come down harder on this industry and make it much harder to access this material. Like I think we're looking for solutions on the wrong side of the problem here.
I mean, I agree with the first part of what Dooby said. It does seem like a porn literacy class is superfluous. All of the things that you guys are describing are things that we could teach without being referenced to porn, right? If the problem is that women's treatment in society, well, that doesn't have to be attacked from the lens of porn. That can be attacked more generally. It seems to me like we're adding an unnecessary but also controversial step to sex education that doesn't inherently add anything at all, I guess.
Well, it's not like we can talk about only the women's treatment in porn, but there's a lot of things that happen in porn, or a lot of things around porn, in which and not just what you see, but also the ways that you engage in it, like the different types of porn that you can watch, or like how often you watch porn and stuff like that. That would probably be beneficial. For example, it would probably be good to teach what a healthy relationship with porn looks like, and like when you might be going too far and like becoming addicted to porn, right? It's not just all these men are beating up on women and not to do that. Like, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. There's a lot of things with a lot of things, like too much porn or too little porn or engaging porn in unhealthy ways is bad, and we should probably teach children the correct way of saying things.
That's the same thing with all forms of addiction, right? Like we talk about hey, are you skipping out on time with your friends to do this? Are you not willing to do things that you used to like because you're spending too much time doing porn, right? This is just the general way that addiction works in general. You can absolutely address this stuff without viewing it from the porn lens. And it's probably going to be more effective. Also, it's going to be more effective to get
drugs is bad, right?
Okay, well that doesn't work, right?
Right? Huh?
Yeah, well, our drug strategy doesn't work, so.
I don't think anyone was saying drugs or porn was bad, right?
I do think they Sorry, go ahead.
No. I don't. To answer Top's question, I don't think you guys were saying that porn is bad, right? You're just saying not to include it in the conversation, which I disagree with.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is they're saying with other forms of addiction, we just say that there's this is what it's like to get addicted. But it seems like with drugs, right? I'm not saying that porn is bad, but I'm saying it seems like with drugs, the solution to the problem has become porn. I mean, not porn bad. Drugs bad, don't consume, right? It seems to be very ineffective. It seems like a much better strategy would be to talk about the different things that people get addicted to, right? To talk about the different drugs that people use and the effects they have on people, and what necessarily a healthy engagement with certain types of drugs looks. We could talk about like softer drugs like marijuana, or even like with a healthy relationship with something like, or even,
It's not I wouldn't consider that a softer drug.
All right, well, I was gonna go even softer after that. So like we keep talking about what a healthy relationship with something like caffeine or alcohol looks like, right? But instead, what we do is we say these things bad, don't do them, and then people like do it anyways. But it seems like the way to talk about them in a way that's effective is like to talk about the actual thing instead of like give people blanket rules that like that they don't necessarily know how to apply.
I think,
Well, no, I think
if you give them general rules, it can be pretty effective, right? Like teaching lessons is kind of how education works. Obviously, you don't need to teach everyone the specific instantiation for like every given addiction, right? You don't need to teach them, okay, now that you know what addiction is, we need to give you the exact form of how it plays in video games and how it plays out in drugs and how it plays out in, sex and all of this sort of stuff. If we teach them the general idea and they can apply it generally, they'll be able to apply it. We don't need to give them an example of every single thing that you can be addicted to, because you can be addicted to pretty much everything.
But in terms of sex, we can agree that porn addiction is something that is a net negative, right? Like,
Well, yeah, all
true.
addiction is
All
net
addiction
negative.
is probably a net negative, right?
Well, I said in terms of sex. So,
Yeah.
Yes,
so
I think we
okay.
can.
So then, why? I just don't get like why not if kids are watching it and this is their interpretation of like, oh, this is what sex is like, this is how I think I should have sex with my girlfriend, blah blah blah, then why not bring it up in discussion? Because I guess in my head, going back to being in high school, if I wasn't presented with an ideal or a topic, I wouldn't talk about it in class. Like I would maybe talk about it with my peers, but other than that, I'm keeping it to myself. I'm not telling anybody. I think for kids, because they are as curious as they are and they probably will see porn, breaching that topic doesn't seem as extreme, I guess, as you guys are making it, but maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Well, I think that so if the issue is that, like, I mean, as you said, some of these kids are watching porn, right? But I don't think that you need to normalize or encourage them watching porn or make them watch it in a more literate way to deal with those problems. You can, in the context of a sex ed class, say, when they're explaining, the act of sex and how you should look for consent, listen to your partner, all these things, right? You could add in, hey, be gentle. Some people like rough sex, other people don't. So listen to your partner, communicate, and you guys can figure out what you like together, right? Just because you've seen it somewhere else, whether it's the fucking Avengers or in porn, right? They were doing it a certain way. That doesn't mean everybody's gonna like it that way. So communicate with your partner, yada yada yada, right? I don't think you need to make them more literate, porn literate, to have that conversation. But I think what we're dealing with is it's a lot of things, but I think it's the issue with us having like a kind of a, I don't want to say schizophrenic. I'm going to say schizophrenic. It's a schizophrenic society, right? Where on one hand, we're saying, hey, children, this is bad. Don't do this thing. Don't do meth. Don't do fucking cocaine. But then don't do fucking fuck, what's that thing? Syrup or I've never done it before because I'm not a moron. Yeah, we start with weed. We used to tell kids and people not to take weed, but then the entertainment industry was normalizing weed use, right? 24/7 in movies, TV shows, music, normalizing weed use, and this is why people say, oh, this is not a big deal. Well, hey, now they're normalizing Xanax and fucking cocaine and God knows what else, and Molly, right? So we say, hey, kids, don't do these things, but then they go out into the world, and everything in the entertainment industry and the vice industry in this country is normalizing exactly the things that we're telling them not to do. And these people are having parties and it's so cool and yada yada, right? And they're doing it while they're on Molly or on ecstasy or whatever the fuck, or they give it cool names like X, right? Because it sounds cool. And I think we need to come down as part of tackling this issue. We need to tackle that issue with how we allow the entertainment industry, the vice industry in this country, to pollute the airwaves with extremely detrimental nonsense, right? And we should be taking this stuff down, making it illegal to spread that kind of nonsense to our children, and making it much harder for our children to have access to that kind of stuff.
But is saying, not to get on the media thing, but is saying like, don't engage in these things, but like, if you do, this is what you should do. Is that a form of encouragement in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it is.
Oh,
I think it should just be flat. Don't do meth. Just like we say, hey, don't do heroin. It's not, oh, if you're gonna do heroin, make sure you're around friends and you're safe and yada yada. Don't do that shit, because that's giving them the pass to do it, and it's normalizing it's normalizing that path, right?
It's the old Nancy Reagan, just say no.
Yeah.
I mean, like legitimately though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The original goat.
Hold on, literally just say no, and have extremely draconian consequences for when people don't say no, when people sell drugs or sell ecstasy, or people are doing this in public, right? Extremely draconian consequences.
Okay, well, so what do you do about like the media that like, promotes this sort of stuff? Like, what would you say to somebody like, God, I forget these rappers.
Snoop Dogg.
Not Snoop.
I make it illegal.
Okay, yeah, maybe if it was 20 years ago, not Snoop Dogg. I'm talking about all the Lils and the Youngs. Those.
Oh, okay.
The Lils and the Youngs. What would you say about the Lils and the Youngs?
Yeah, I'd make it illegal for them to promote this in a positive light. If they're gonna make music or whatever about it, it should be dealing with how harmful it is to people.
I'm sorry, it's not just rap; it's also
right.
EDM.
Yeah,
Like,
it's also country music. It's also like hard rock. It's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
See, this is why I call it extremely draconian. You're talking about artificially like influencing our entire culture by like banning certain forms of expression. Do you not see how that's?
We already do that. What's wrong with this?
What do you mean we already do that?
So if we ban, I guess I was gonna go to something super easy, like we would ban religious expression, where like with human sacrifice and shit like that, right? But we also ban expression that sexualizes children, right? In some states, it's illegal to make a lolly porn, right? Or make drawings that are depicting children that are like sexual.
Wait,
so
really?
we already banned. So yeah, it is, and not in all the U.S. It's I think it's federally not illegal.
That sounds like a first.
No, it's federally illegal, but in some states it's still legal. But that being said, we already do that. So we're influencing our culture because we don't want a culture where children are being sexualized. We make it illegal to sexualize things that look like children.
Sure, but these are principles that are very unpopular already in society, right? Like, I think 99.9% of people are like, yeah, sexualizing children is about the worst thing that you can possibly do. Yeah, sacrificing humans is about the worst thing you can possibly do. I think it's a lot more draconian to censor behaviors and expression that are relatively popular. I think there's
that's silly.
There's a huge difference. Do you not think there's a huge difference between?
Yeah, I think it's harder, right? But this is the
okay. Yeah, but if it's harder, then it's going to require more and more draconian measures, right? Like, it's fine. Easy. But it's not fun. Well, do you not think there's anything bad about these, like the inherent loss of freedom? Or
no, I think that some people. I think there's two ways of thinking about freedom, right? So there's that old meme from Parks and Recreation with that dude with the mustache. It's like, oh, freedom is the ability to balloon up to 600 pounds and die of diabetes at fucking 30 years old or some shit like that, right? So that's one version of freedom. The other version of freedom, the one that I prefer, is encouraging people to understand that freedom comes from making the right decisions, right? When you're getting high all the time, you're eating a lot of really bad food, you're sitting around all day, or you're addicted to porn or sex, whatever the fuck, you're not free, right? You're doing things that you think you want to do, but you're not free. You've enslaved yourself to vices, right? That's a bad thing, right? So I want people to be free from vices, and I think to do that in our society, because we have such a capitalistic entertainment industry run society, we need to mold what people are getting presented all day, because they walk outside, they turn on their fucking TV or their fucking iPods or whatever, and immediately they're bombarded with a version of society, right? I think we can mold that version of society into something that's much more healthy for them, much more healthy for everybody.
So I'm curious, how far do you go with this? Like, should we also like ban stuff like sugary foods? Because as you said, like, the right to balloon to 600 pounds and get diabetes. Well, I mean, why not just ban sugary foods? Why not ban sodas? Why not ban all of these things? They're ultimately not good for us. They have a negative effect on society. Would you do that too?
In my ideal situation, I'd make it illegal for these companies like McDonald's or.
Okay, but would you make it illegal like soda? Would soda be illegal under Dooby's rule?
I would restrict soda sizes very, very harshly if we're gonna have soda these places at all.
So we can have a sugar tax too.
Yeah, sugar taxes are great. Right? Fast food tax, like so something that happened in New York, I think it was like 5 years ago or something, is they noticed that people were buying like fucking half-gallon jugs of soda, right, at these fast food places. So the city imposed a regulation that restricted the size of sodas. This was meant to, of course, keep people healthier. They don't want people, and because we live in a society where your health impacts the health of everybody around you through like the taxes that are going to be paid, through the strain put on healthcare services, things like this. You have a responsibility to be somewhat healthy for your community, right? For the betterment of your community. So they imposed this thing. And people complained like, oh, well, I want my fucking gallon of soda, right? And I think that was eventually overturned, and like they said it was unconstitutional or some crazy shit like that. But I think that is the direction we should go. We should understand the reality is that humans have low impulse control typically. A lot of them aren't very smart, and that's okay, right? A lot of them don't really think long term. That's okay. This is why we have issues with climate change deniers and people who want to wave off climate change like it's not a real thing, don't give a fuck about it because you're not seeing it like right in front of them. And we need to move toward a society where we accept that's fact, right? That unfortunate fact, and then mold society to deal with that fact, right? And I think we're right now, and that could be restricting the size of sodas, could be sugar taxes, it could be taxes if you're too overweight and that's putting a strain on the healthcare systems, that's disproportionate to your place in society or whatever. It could be all these things, right? But with porn, I think kind of getting back to that topic, I think I'd make it much harder to access. The ideal thing would be banning it outright, but in the short term, they can much harder to access by requiring them to put in a verified ID and having that ID verified by a third party somewhere.
So why let individuals have any control over their life at all?
They can have control within the boundaries that are set up for them.
Right, which doesn't include having a soda.
That's no way. Hold on, but that's already the case. You don't have full control. Just go out and do whatever the fuck you want. There are rules. If you break those rules, you get
okay. You're right. It is a spectrum. We are on one side of the spectrum where we're relatively free, and you want to go to the other side where the government can decide what quantity of soda we're allowed to have.
I want to go to the side where pornography isn't being normalized. People aren't being sexually exploited. Children aren't being taught how to use porn sites. We don't have 18-year-olds making OnlyFans accounts so that all these fucking weirdos online can see their boob. That's where I want to go. Right? I want to go to a much safer, friendlier, healthier society.
So I don't think it's
the money that's in the industry.
I've had a lot of conversations with you, Dooby, over the years, and over time, you say that you love America and you think that America is a great place and everything. You sign yourself as American. You're very proud about that and everything. So, like, the things that you've described, like, do you think that? I know that maybe you're gonna say you don't really care, but like, don't you think that a lot of that feels kind of like not the point of what America is?
I think that living today, or basing your love for your country or people today on the ideas of people that existed 200 or 300 years ago is silly. I think that, like the Constitution is an evolving, living document. We need to our ideas of what America is and should be are living and should evolve. I think that we're at a place where the Second Amendment, right? That should be done away with. I think we need to re-examine freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that sort of thing. I really, I love my people. I love Americans. I love the United States. But because I love this country so much and I love the people here so much, I think we need to make a lot of improvements to help our people be happier, safer, healthier.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy to say that we want a government that promotes a healthy lifestyle. Like, I really don't think that that's ridiculous. And if it takes certain implementations of laws to sort of allow for a better outcome in terms of how our society functions and the health and like mental and physical health of people and members of our society, I really don't think that it's a bad thing for the government to get involved in some aspects, like with things like a sugar tax, like I said earlier, or increasing regulations to porn. Like these are all ideas that are probably going to promote a like better general welfare, which is a very American, like it's part of the Constitution to promote the general welfare of American society. I think something like that is helpful for the country.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
well-
I think the difference is like in general, right? The way we look at like the general welfare for society from an American sense, it's usually is like being able to do what you want as long as you don't like hurt other people, right? Like you can like if you want to like eat a bunch of sugar, get fat, and die of diabetes at 27, and that is you living your best life. As long as you're not like hurting other people in the process, like that's probably okay, right? That's kind of like the stance that like not historically at least like America takes on the whole like look out for your people and like endorse freedom and crap.
Yeah, America has rugged in, like Bernard Sanderson said, America has rugged individualism for the poor people and collectivism for the rich, right? I don't like that, right? I think
you don't want individualism for anyone.
And because I want to move to a place where we have a universal healthcare system where all of our people are guaranteed healthcare, no matter their financial situation, no matter anything, right? We need to understand that when we do that, then your health becomes the community's problem. It's not just your problem. Right, and this is your mental health and your physical health, right? So you're not just hurting yourself; you're hurting your community when you're unhealthy.
I mean, I feel like we just have a disagreement on moral intuitions here. Like, I don't.
What's immoral about what I've said?
What I didn't say was immoral. I said we disagreed. I think the means that you're using to achieve these ends basically destroy the entire. I think that. Life is experienced from the point of view of an individual, and that you're putting too much focus on the collective, and you're being too totalitarian and controlling with what people do. And I don't think it would end with soda taxes.
Do you think it's totalitarian to give people tickets if they don't wear seatbelts?
I actually don't know.
What?
My gut feeling says it is totalitarian. It is wrong to punish people for doing something.
It's wrong to punish people for not wearing a seatbelt that's going to save their life if they were in an accident. And their death would put a strain on the system that wouldn't be there otherwise.
And
so that's
well, I mean, it's not the specific instance of the principle that's necessarily bad. It's how you can apply that, right? Like, does the government have the right to force you to do things that don't affect other people, right? Because like in the instance with the seatbelt, yeah, I want all my friends and countrymen to be wearing seatbelts so that there are less auto deaths. Obviously, that's something that everybody, pretty much everybody wants. I don't think everybody wants to force that opinion on other people and penalize them financially for not agreeing with them morally. Like I think it's bad to not wear a seatbelt. I would encourage all my friends and family to wear a seatbelt. But if someone disagrees with me, I don't think I have any right to say, well, we're allowed to punish you because
especially
you don't want to
if
wear a
it's
seatbelt.
your friends and family, because if they die, unless they have some kind of life insurance in place, you're probably going to have to kick in some money for the funeral. So they're hurting.
Well, yeah,
you.
that's personal relations, though, right? Like, I'm not saying we can't get mad at our friends if they don't wear a seatbelt.
Right.
Not just that, but their absence from your life hurts you too.
Right, and it's taken away from, it hurts the economy. It puts strain on the systems, right? So I understand
patience,
that we experience life as individuals, right? I am a box of ideas and juices and meat wandering around, right? And just like you guys have all your internal voices and battles and experiences. You're walking around with them, right? And we bump into each other now and then, and we interact with each other and we throw our ideas at each other, but the reality, and that's how it feels, right? We're all just in our own bubbles all the time. But the reality is, that we live in a society. And in this society, because we're interacting with all these other bubbles, we affect the people around us in the community, right?
No one denies that.
Okay,
But
then
I mean,
don't-
like,
then-
okay, well, should we ban vacations?
Because you affect
Noah,
them, you have a
what's your stance on
responsibility and a
vacations?
duty to this community.
Should people be allowed to have vacations? I mean, it hurts the people around them because it hurts the economy. You know, people, if they don't have vacations, they'll be working more, they'll be producing more. You know, people will have more stuff. So if you're not at work, you know, we're not going to have the stuff that you would create. Should we ban vacations? Like, I don't.
But stressed out workers and
it's not
inefficient
just
workers.
analogous.
And if they go on
Okay,
vacation,
do you
they're
think-
providing economic
That's
activities.
analogous.
That's not true. You don't think that getting rid of vacations, even if you're okay, maybe not getting rid of all vacations, but reducing vacation time wouldn't increase like the economic output? You think
No, but
that's
the
like a
quality of
completely
production
you think that's a completely ridiculous hypothetical that getting rid of some vacation time from some people would hurt economic output? You think that's just completely ridiculous?
Should I respond to that, or are you going to, Dylan?
So I guess my counter argument would be that economic production in terms of quality of output and job satisfaction and the correlation between job satisfaction.
Why does
and
job
quality
satisfaction
production-
matter to you guys?
Job satisfaction matters to me because I'm trying to promote the general welfare of the society as well. With job satisfaction, in terms of economic output rates, they both correlate in terms of how well things are produced, how much
Sure, but why should
economic
you-
output, and how much more productivity is increased in a firm.
Right, but under your guys' framework, why should an individual's job satisfaction be enough to limit their economic contribution to society?
Because
mean-
their individual job satisfaction and the impact that it has on the society, I'm trying to demonstrate to you that when you increase the individual's job satisfaction with things like vacation time, right? This also positively impacts the economy in terms of productivity rates. Because we see as a trend with things like increased ownership and increased vacation time, paid sick days, things like that.
Okay, fine.
People's productivity increases.
Here's a more clear example. How about retirees? Retirees aren't doing anything for the economy. Why shouldn't we make retirees go back to work?
Because retirees have already outputted into their community to provide.
You don't
for the
think they
next
can output
generation.
anymore? That's ridiculous.
Wait, a lot of retirees can't, physically cannot.
Okay,
output
well,
much
a
more
lot
into
of
the
them
economy.
can. I mean, fine. If you want to say that disabled retirees have it, under your guys' framework, why can't we have, why shouldn't we force retirees back to work?
Well, because these people typically are older, and
They can still work.
Yeah, they can, but they put in a lifetime of work for the community, right? Contributing to the great work that is our society, and we've decided at a certain age it's time for them to sit back and relax and enjoy the fruits of their labor. Right?
We've
Which is
decided
living-
that, but you're
living
trying
in
to
a happy,
change
healthy
society.
society that's
You're not
taking care of
appealing
them.
to how society has been, right? Like, I agree that's how we have been, and I think it's completely fair that we want old people to, sit back and relax a little bit. I think that's completely fair. I'm asking under your guys' framework where, it seems to me like individual satisfaction, if it doesn't contribute to, the collective's well-being, isn't something that's valuable. So we have a case here. Old people could be contributing to society even more by, contributing, having a job. Maybe they can't, obviously if you're 80, you can't work at the coal mine anymore, but there's still productive ways that you can be employed. I don't see under your guys' framework why we shouldn't force people to work till they die.
Well,
Wait, so the thing-
happiness standard and what Dylan was talking about with the productivity scale and when someone's actually satisfied with themselves and everything, productivity goes up. A lot of miserable 80-year-olds aren't actually going to be able to contribute that much to it, and they may actually bring the overall morale of a workplace lower. No, with full of people.
Hold on, but it'll bring the morale of a family lower, right?
Yeah,
of a
true.
community lower. So we're not just talking the economic output isn't the only important thing. What we're talking about helping our society be healthier, happier, in every way, right? And this includes their mental health. This includes their physical health. This includes I don't want people stressed out,
What if
feeling
porn
like they
helps
need to keep
people not
grinding
be
when
stressed out?
they're 7 years old. What was that?
What if porn helps people not be stressed out?
You have to
Then
demonstrate
they've-
that using empirics, first of all, and second of all,
I don't
we've
think
seen
you have
the
to demonstrate that. I think pretty
Wait,
much.
No, that's absolute. Wait, because if the information I have conflicts with that in terms of how porn is heavily correlated to loneliness, anxiety increases, desensitization
Well,
to
wait, yeah,
violence
that's-
and things like that.
That's obviously
Not a
not
stress
causal.
reliever,
Obviously, if
it's,
you're lonely, you're not going
bad.
to be having real sex, so you're going to have to supplement it with fake sex. That's an
Wait,
obvious
hold on, but
case of the
that's-
correlation being obviously not causal. It's definitely causal in the other way. The reason you watch porn is because you're lonely. You're not lonely because you watch porn. I think that example is obvious.
Wait, hold on. But so I think if someone might be true that some people, don't really, what is it, dopamine that says, don't really get a dopamine rush in their daily lives. Maybe they don't have a lot of friends. They don't really do many entertaining or pleasurable things. So all they have is sitting in their bed late at night and jerking themselves off into their pants. Maybe that's what they do to feel happy for a little bit. That's a sad state to live in, right? So I would encourage, rather than excusing that behavior and saying, hey, it's okay for you to do this, to live the sad life where all you can do is jerk off into your pants at the end of the day. Hey, we're going to help you with other shit. It sounds like you've got some mental health issues. Sounds like you need to meet people. We're going to have community events where you can go out and meet people. If you have mental health problems, hey, here's a fucking therapist, right? I want to build a society where people can have these needs, because all these are needs, right? If you're having mental health issues, you need help, right? So where people can have these needs dealt with by the community, by the society, without any barriers to it, right? I don't want any cost barriers. I don't want any obviously any racial barriers. Like, I want these people, if someone needs help, they get help. Okay, that's a society that I want to move to. And if there are things in our society that are net negatives and they're hurting our people, then we get rid of those things. Right? Even if in the short term it feels good to eat 5,000 calories at McDonald's, in the long term that's hurting you, that the community having access to that thing is hurting the community, so we're gonna get rid of that thing. It's simple.
Okay, well, I just feel like you're using two different standards for things that you like and things that you don't like.
I'm
things-
not sure if Top Dolphin is trying to talk to us.
Yeah, I was, but I was
Oh!
muted down.
Go for it.
Oh my god. But I mean, at the end of the day, the way we organize societies generally isn't that we math what the most productive unit into society would look like and try to make everybody that person. Generally what we do is we say, here's a bunch of options of things you can do, and then when we find things that are generally better for people, we try to encourage people through things like education to make the decision that we think would probably make them most happy, right? Rather than making rules to stop people from doing things that they think would make them happy.
I think people don't know what's best for them all the time. I think that
yeah,
but
they might not know what's best for them, but no one knows better.
The difference is the approach, right? So the approach is different. So a really good example of this is alcohol, right? We allow people to consume alcohol with some restrictions, albeit, but at the end of the day, we don't say alcohol is bad for you, right? Especially alcohol abuse is very bad for you. So we outlaw alcohol. What we do is we try to make sure that people understand the proper ways to engage with alcohol, that where you can necessarily reap the benefits from alcohol, right? Which there are some benefits from alcohol. For example, I think there's if you one glass of red wine a day is correlated with lower cancer rates, and there's also the social.
Is it the alcohol or is it some other thing in the wine that's giving that benefit? It's probably some other thing that people can get in some other way.
I don't know. That's
Yeah,
all I know is it's the red wine a day thing. Okay, but it's not only that. There's also social benefits. There's to alcohol. There's also experiential benefits to alcohol, right? And these are all
inhibitions are lowered, right? But I think it's because lots of people, given especially these days with people being more and more kind of atomized and in their own bubbles on the internet, people are socially awkward. They're not really used to interacting with people all that often, and yeah, some of these people might have anxiety issues. Some people might have what's it? Something that I
mean, we don't even have to go that far. It's so easy,
but
right?
Hold on, but it seems like there are probably other ways to deal with those issues that don't require basically drugging these people into being comfortable. Right? No,
I'm not even talking about that, right? For example, a fun experience that you can have, right, is you and a bunch of friends get drunk, right? And one of your friends is a little tipsy and he trips and falls, and then he laughs it off, and everybody says it's funny, and everybody has a laugh, and you feel closer to your friends as that, and you get some social utility out of it, and you get some like life experience out of it, and no one's harmed, no one's hurt, no one's feeling like insecure and inadequate. Everyone just has this positive experience that comes from like the night out at the pub, right?
You know, unless you trip and you break your arm because you're too fucking drunk, or you vomit all over your clothes, or you vomit all over another person, give them
and
COVID,
so the idea
or you end up getting in a car because
outlawing alcohol, right? What we try to do as a society is we say, hey,
some people.
Like there's like a limit into which people can drink and probably like gain the benefits from alcohol without like
there's no benefit
without all of the like negative consequences, right?
The benefit the benefit you just gave us is, oh, someone trips and you laugh at them. Well, fuck. Like if someone's so drunk they're tripping, they're tripping, they probably shouldn't be walking on their own.
Someone like stumbles over their words and says something kind of funny. Like we could make this the most innocuous thing possible, right? The idea is that like there are probably some benefits to things in society that are also bad. Like for example, sugar. There are benefits to sugar, but too much sugar is bad. So instead of banning these things blanketly, we try to educate people so that we allow them to reap the benefits of these things without like incurring the consequences. There's probably a word for this,
right?
But I don't know.
Okay, but I'm not talking about banning.
You want to say something?
I mean, I was just gonna say that like we literally like need sugar to function, right? Like sugar is like obviously not as much as we were.
I'm pretty sure that's not completely true. Like
no, your body breaks down. Even things that don't appear to be sugar, your body breaks down in terms of.
We need carbohydrates to function, but like part of this.
To be clear, I'm not talking about
banning sugar,
cookies.
as in like the sugar that we put in like drinks and food. It's like we don't really need that. It's like,
okay, but really, I'm not talking about making it illegal to bake cookies, right? I'm talking about
why wouldn't
in terms of like the sugar thing. Attacks, right? And banning a lot of these fast food chains, a lot of them from outright existing, but most of them from advertising on TV or on billboards.
We're changing zoning laws,
especially to fucking children. Yeah, changing zoning laws, right? I'm not talking about making it illegal to make a fucking hamburger, right? But they're like you said, there are levels, right? And I want to encourage a certain kind of behavior. So yeah, if you're overweight, you're going to be taxed differently, right, than other people. There's gonna be a consequence associated with that. Hey, but to get rid of that, we're gonna provide you with health services to help you lose your weight. I think that's fine. Like I don't. Yeah, if you're like overweight, it would suck to have to pay more taxes or to have some kind of fee attached to what you do, and because you're overweight. But the reality is, you being overweight hurts other people in the community if we have a universal healthcare system. So you got to lose weight. Sorry.
I mean, sure, we should also like tax cancer patients more, because they're like a drain on society.
Yeah, that's where I know
Come on, you know that's bad faith. No one chooses to have cancer.
Wait, hold on.
I mean, clearly I'm sitting here in this panel, so I must be choosing to develop cancer.
Okay, right? Like, what about people who go outside and don't put on sunscreen? Should we tax those people too? Like where do we end? Like this like road, right? You can't say that's bad faith, right? You say like, oh, no one chooses to have cancer. Well, most people don't choose to be overweight, right? They choose to make that bad decisions that lead to being overweight. And the same way they choose to, like, people might choose to do bad decisions that lead to having cancer, right? Like going out to the beach and like tanning or spending a lot of time tanning beds. That might cause cancer if you do it like too much. Or like smoking, right? There are tons of behaviors, right, that people partake in that you could necessarily say that they chose to get cancer, right? Now, there are probably cases of cancer in which like they get it and it was like a predisposition based on biology. But there are also a lot of like activities you can engage in that will increase the likelihood for things like skin cancer and lung cancer.
Yeah, not just that, but you can also have like biological predisposition to being overweight as well.
That as well.
Sure.
Well, I'm just gonna say that like overweight. I don't know how Dooby is defining overweight here. Dooby, do you mean like overweight to the point of like you can't really function very well, kind of like obese?
I'm talking like just I was gonna say morbidly obese, but that's even too much. Just obese.
Okay.
Obese, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of people are overweight, like the women you see on Instagram are overweight technically, but people don't call them that. But even though
I understand that.
Okay.
But yeah, I really, it seems like you guys are kind of like you're clinging on to this idea that it's your choice, right? And that you're making these choices and you should have the ability to make these choices, even if they're bad for you, even if they hurt you in your community. But I don't really see any like value in allowing you to make those choices if they hurt you, right? And if there's some things that we can outright ban, or that would be kind of silly to outright ban, like baking cookies. But there can be a tax associated with that. If you're gonna go and buy fucking chocolate to bake some cookies, right? You're gonna be taxed more for that chocolate, right? So we're gonna disincentive. We're gonna have a disincentive to that activity. Right? So you can do it now and then, but if you do it all the time, it's gonna get really fucking expensive.
I mean, you say we can't ban cookies, but I feel like we totally can. We ban substances all the time. I feel like it would be very feasible to treat cookies like we treat drugs. I don't see why you're stopping at, at cookies. Banning soda's okay, but cookies, you can have a couple cookies. Like, I don't see under your framework, which says that, hey, this is something that's going to negatively harm you in the long run, so you shouldn't be allowed to do it. I don't see why we should allow cookies either.
Well, I haven't proposed banning sodas. I've proposed limiting the
okay,
soda
but why not
sizes
ban
at
sodas?
fast food places?
Sure, but why not ban sodas then?
Because I don't think that I'm not like I know you guys are calling me like authoritarian or totalitarian. I'm not, right? I want people to be able to go out and buy a soda if they want a soda, but I want them to do it responsibly, and I'm going to put barriers in place to encourage them to do it responsibly, to make it more difficult to do it irresponsibly. Right. So if they get to a position where they're chugging 4 liters of Coke every day, right, then hey, they've gone through a lot of barriers to get to that point. And now when they're overweight and they have diabetes and shit like that, because of these decisions that they're making every day, well, hey, then yeah, we're gonna put a tax on them. We're gonna encourage them to go to like a weight loss camp or something.